of Planning North. I welcome all the members of the public who've come this morning. I'll do some housekeeping and introductions. So I'm Councillor Kathy Pearce, Chair of the committee. Go through some housekeeping things. First of all, bar drill. We're not expecting a drill, so if the alarm goes off, it's a real thing. And just go through reception, out the main doors into King Square. Toilets are also in reception should you need them, and there is some water over on the table to your right. If you need any, please help yourself. So this meeting is a hybrid meeting, and that means that committee members are present in Bridgewater House, but the meeting is also available online via Teams. Please note that the meeting is being recorded, and can I remind all of those in the room to turn your mobile phones off or to silent, please, and can those joining us online also please turn off your cameras and microphones so that the meeting isn't disturbed. I'll now introduce those taking part in the committee today. To my left are officers from our legal and democratic teams. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Roy Pinney, who's our legal advisor for today. And to my right are the planning officers who will present the applications. On the wings of the table are the councillors who will debate and decide the applications. The format will be as the published agenda, and a copy of the officer reports can be found on the council website. Each application will be taken in turn. Officers will outline each application, followed by public speaking time. Only members of the public who have registered to speak can make representation, and councillors around the table will then debate and decide on each application. During the debate, there will be a proposer and a seconder for a resolution. Members will vote on the proposal, and only members who have been present throughout the application will be able to vote. The voting options are for, against, abstain or defer. Votes will be counted and the result announced. So now we're going into the main body of the agenda, and can I have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from absence from Councillor Matthew Martin and Councillor Brian Smedley.
Thank you. Now go on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. And can I invite? Oh yes, sorry. Yes, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Today, as you'll notice, Councillor Martin, who is Vice Chair, isn't able to be with us today. Because it's such a long agenda, I would really appreciate a Vice Chair just to help me keep the meeting moving along efficiently. So I'm therefore asking if there are any nominations, please, for Vice Chair. Councillor Hendry.
No, I would like to nominate Bob Gilbert.
Well, hang on, we've got one nomination. Yes, Councillor Filmer, would you like to say no? Rightio. So that's our first proposal. So all those in favour of Councillor Ham being Vice Chair for today, please show your hand. Congratulations.
Welcome back.
Would you like to come up and sit next to me for
I suppose. I'll get the charge in a minute.
While we're doing that, I'll go to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. And can I invite Roy Pinner to just go through a brief summary of why we need to declare interest, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members will already be well familiar with this because of their previous work on various committees, and in particular this committee. Essentially, the planning process involves decision making by individual members, and it's important that that process is carried out, not only carried out fairly, but it also appears fair to an unbiased observer, whether that's members of the public or people learning about these decisions from outside. And as I say, members will be familiar with what's required from their own from the Code of Conduct and from the Constitution. But essentially, we're looking at 3 different types of interests, and they affect how members can and cannot be involved in the business of this committee as a quasi-judicial planning committee. The first and most prominent category of interest, disclosable pecuniary interests, which are business interests or wider financial interests. Where you have an interest of that nature as a member of this committee, you may not participate in the discussion, you may not vote in the matter, and you're required to leave the room while the matter is being discussed. There are lesser grades of interest, I can describe them as that. There is the other registrable interests, which is undisclosed, unpaid directorships or certain public roles. In those situations, members may speak on the matter only if members of the public can also speak on them, but they cannot take part in the discussion, they cannot vote on the item, and they cannot remain in the room. The only exception to that is where the role of the member in question is linked to their involvement either in another local authority, such as a parish council, or in a company owned by the Somerset Council. The third category of interest, which I'll deal with very quickly, formerly members of a particular vintage may know these as personal interests. They're now defined as non-registrable interests. And this is where an item of business might reasonably be regarded as affecting the well-being or financial position of the member, a member of the member's family, or a person with whom they have a close association. And this is a wider interest other than that affecting the general taxpayers. Where you have a personal interest, I'll call it that, it will only affect the member's ability to participate in the discussion if it's so close that it directly affects you, in which case you will take no part in the matter, you will not vote, you will not discuss, and you'll be required to leave the meeting. So, Chair, those are the three categories of interest and a brief guide to how members will need to conduct themselves where they have such interests.
Thank you very much. So therefore, I'll now ask members for any declarations of interest. The Councillor Bolt,
Item 9.
can you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, item 9, participating for Denmark. It's within my division. I've taken no part in any discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd on change item 5 on the application. I've got 0825 00190 and there's a 191. It is part of my division, but I've taken no part in any discussion to do with the docs.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. I sit on the Axborough Drainage Board, but I haven't spoken to anybody about any case about anything.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 129, the application, I take no part in that at all. It is in my division. And just one other thing, I have to leave for another meeting this afternoon, so apologies this afternoon. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Filmer.
Same declaration as councillor Grant, item 8, page 129 is within our division. I've taken no part, and also on the internal director's board, but have taken no part in the discussions either.
And I need to make a non-registrable interest declaration also on items 5 and 6 of the agenda for Bridgewater Docks. I have taken part in discussions, but I've come here with an open mind. And Councillor Bruce, sorry.
Thank you, second corner here. The Parrot Drainage Board, member of the Parrot Drainage Board, but I haven't taken part in any discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should have said that my interest was as being a Bridgewater Town Councillor. Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bradford.
Exactly the same as Councillor Bruce. Parrot Drainage Board, no part in discussion.
Thank you. We then go on to public question time. There are members of the public have registered to speak, and I will call you when we're considering each application in turn. So that takes us on to agenda item 4, which is the planning application for land north of the A372 and east of New Road, Overy. Estine, can you take us through the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. The presentation just slowing up. Bear with me a second. So the application is a site called land north of the A372 East of New Road in Overy. It's an outline application with some matters reserved, so effectively we've got detail of access, but all other matters layout for example, landscaping scale are reserved for the erection of up to 38 dwellings, with the erection of a 71 square metre flexible commercial floor space, i.e. probably a shop, public open space, drainage and associated works. I can up there. Bear me, I just like to try and make it full screen so it's easy for everyone to see. Now. Yes, because it's absolutely shared. I think we just have to persevere. It's not quite as live on screen as I would like, but site is Othery, so we're sort of members whatever it is, but we're sort of southeast of Bridgewater area on the A372. So check go through. Bear with me, hang on, this isn't, I can't see my notes on this version. So, yeah. But just to present the yeah, just to do it. I mean, the application is before committee because the officer's recommendation is contrary to the views of the parish council. So this shows the site location plan. So with the site outlined in red, so we're on the northern edge of the village. So the proposal extends into two fields, one here, part of which was previously developed to provide an affordable housing scheme some 10 years ago or so, known as Peppard's Close. So we've got existing residential development on the southern or western sides. We've got an existing farm complex on the northern side. So this, so I mentioned it is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access. So this is just an illustrative layout plan, so it's not fixed, just to give an indication of how the proposed development could be accommodated on the site. Access is a matter that we are looking to determine at this stage, and the access is proposed on the western boundary of the site onto a new road. There is, as part of this application, to be secured footway connections into Peppard's Close, and then there's some of the land on the eastern edge of the site does fall within an area of high flood risk, so that would be looking to contain drainage features and some of the open space that's proposed. So just some photos just to get a bit of context for the site. So I mentioned there's an existing affordable housing scheme which is just on the southern boundary. So that's what this top left photo shows. So this is just stood on that road along here, and that's sort of a small scheme. And then we have top right. This is within the scheme, so sort of within Peppard's Close, looking out towards across the application site, which is beyond. So some of that footway connection I mentioned would be coming in at the end of this access road here. And then bottom right here, this is just looking across sort of the northern field. So you can see I mentioned there's that farm complex on the which runs along that northern boundary. And then bottom left is again looking from sort of Pepper's Close out across other parts of the site. Some more photos again looking across the top field towards that farm complex. Looking back across the site to some of the nearby dwellings, we get a sense of sort of residential context that's nearby. Again, bottom right, looking across part of the site, and this one, bottom left, shows this section of new road, and the access will be formed sort of partway up this road through where there is existing sort of hedgerow. So these are the main considerations that I'll take members through as part of this application. So principal development, that's going to be a fundamental consideration here. Highways, access and parking, flood risk and drainage, ecology and phosphates, amenity, layout and open space, and I'll touch on planning obligations. In terms of principal development, so O3 in the settlement local plan is designated as a tier 4 village. So this is a site which is outside the settlement boundary for O3, but lies adjacent to it. So the relevant policies in the local plans of policy T4 says that schemes for affordable housing can be acceptable where there is evidence of local need in such locations. So that's the standard policy basis when looking at tier 4 villages. That's predicated on there being a housing need, and in this case, there is what we would consider an up-to-date housing needs assessment, and that's from 2024, that identified a need for 12 affordable rented units. Home finder data from 2026 and more up-to-date data that our affordable housing colleagues have extracted from the system indicates that need is now increased to 22 households. And in addition to that, they consider there to be a likely additional need for intermediate housing. So that's things like shared ownership housing, housing products. So this scheme will provide 40% affordable housing. So that equates to 16 units, which will make a meaningful contribution to meeting that local need identified through the housing needs survey and on the home finder register. So in terms of the policy position, I mentioned that the policy allows schemes to come forward, affordable housing schemes. Now they can be cross-subsidised by market housing, whether that's justified by viability evidence. That's the standard process when we get to tier 4 villages. Now we're not in that scenario here. We haven't had such evidence submitted. And in that regard, there is some conflict with the policy because that's what the policy requires. Normally, this is an exception site-based policy. I'd say that isn't what the basis of the application was submitted on. The application was submitted on the basis that the council isn't able to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing. And it's in that context that we have to consider the proposal in front of us. So we've got to acknowledge that there is some context, some conflict there. Locationally, the site is adjacent to the settlement boundary. It joins an existing affordable housing scheme and does represent, in our view, a logical extension to the village. There's existing built form along the northern boundary, and therefore we see it as it really is as an infill opportunity sitting between two banks of existing development. There are some other benefits in terms of small commercial units, which could be a village store, biodiversity gains. There's local labour condition. There's some temporary economic boost during construction that have to be weighed in the mix. So there is conflict with T4, so that's acknowledged. We have to give, or we will give, significant weight to the meeting the substantial proportion of the village's outstanding affordable housing need, plus the site being a logical extension to the village. So we're looking at 5-year land supply applications. We have to consider the benefits against the harms and weigh them appropriately. And the significant contribution towards meeting the village's outstanding affordable housing need is, in our view, a significant benefit which outweighs the identified policy conflict. And in our view, that satisfies the principle of development. Coming on to other matters, highways and access. So the scheme proposes a new access onto the A372, as I mentioned, so that's sort of through the hedgerow along this boundary. So there are internal footways which are provided within the site of Pepper's Close. And outside Pepper's Close, there's an uncontrolled crossing point over the A372, which benefits from drop curbs and tactile paving. The new access of 2.4 meters by 43, which is appropriate to the speed limit. A road safety audit has been undertaken in regard to the design of the access, including considering matters such as can large vehicles turn in and out of the site without sort of cutting across the highway. And the audit identified no significant concerns. In terms of traffic generation, the scheme's going to result in approximately 20 two-way vehicle movements during peak hours, which in general terms would be considered to be low, given the nature of the road. And consequently, we haven't received an objection. The Highway Authority do not object to the proposal. They have been involved in detailed discussions throughout. They are seeking conditions to secure the footways that I've mentioned in terms of that internal connection, visibility displays, drainage, state roads and construction management to manage the sort of the effects of what development's going on, and the need for a Section 106 agreement to secure a travel plan. Now, subject to those measures, we consider the proposal delivers a safe means of access for all users and is considered policy compliant. I mentioned earlier on in terms of flood risk that the eastern part of the site is in a high risk flood zone. That's what's indicated by this this colouring area here. The rest of the site is in flood zone 1. And the proposal has the potential to locate all its built form within flood zone 1, and in that regard, we've passed the sequential test. Statutory consultees have had detailed input in the application, including the Environment Agency, Drainage Board and Lead Local Flood Authority, and they are not raising any objection. So on that ground, subject to conditions to secure conditions that they've requested, which include that there must be, all accommodation must at least have a second story, specifications about finished floor levels and detailed drainage. There are no objections regarding flood risk and drainage, and we'd consider that part of the scheme acceptable. Coming on to ecology and phosphate matters, so the site does fall within the catchment of the Somerset Levels and Moors Ramsar site, which is affected by phosphate pollution, which members will be very aware of. However, the scheme can connect to the existing mains drains in the locality, and that discharges at Chiltern Trinity Treatment Works, which is downstream of the Ramsar, and therefore being able to screen out impacts on the Ramsar site, and there's no requirement to undertake a habitat regulations assessment. The scheme's been subject to detailed ecological surveying and with lots of input from the Somerset ecologist. It can meet its 10% biodiversity net gain objectives, subject to, and they need to be secured by a Section 106 lead agreement, but again, subject to securing the mitigation and conditions proposed, we would consider the scheme to be acceptable in that regard. I just want to touch on amenity considerations, particularly in terms of noise and odour. So the application has been accompanied by assessments. In regard to noise assessments, that's looked at whether potential local sources of noise, which would be either road noise, given it adjoins an A road, and farm noise arising from the agricultural enterprise, which is located on the northern boundary. So in terms of the road noise, it's identified that is in a low risk category and require a modest level of intervention. So that's required in terms of building fabric. So improvements that could be made to the building fabric to mitigate noise arising. Farm noise, it said, has the potential to have some adverse effects, but that's very much dependent on context. And it's very much highlighted that that context is very specific, and in rural locations where farm noises are characteristic of the surrounding environment, some of those noises are to be reasonably expected. Nonetheless, it acknowledges the presence of a farming enterprise along the northern boundary and has proposed additional mitigation to lessen noise impacts arising, and that's in the form of acoustic barrier, which will be positioned on the inside of the hedgerow along the northern boundary to provide additional protection for residents in that locality. The odour assessment undertaken identified only a slight risk of odour and nothing significant, and consequently on those grounds we received no objection from Environmental Health, who have reviewed those reports. In terms of sort of looking at residential amenity in the relationship with existing properties and the amenity for future residents, the scheme is in outline only, so we don't have a detailed layout that we'll be looking to approve at this stage. But from what we've seen from the indicative layout, we're satisfied that a layout can be achieved that provides good standard of amenity for the residents that would live on the site and for existing residents. So in terms of just wrapping up the amenity section, there are conditions that are proposed which have been recommended by Environmental Health, which secures assessment of contaminated land, again, construction management, and secures the noise mitigation measures, which I've just indicated. And then come on to layout, open space and landscaping. So the size of a site of this size would require a local area of play. There is a local equipped area of play also proposed. The site is only 1 unit below that, so the threshold for requiring it, and one's indicated on the plans. So a lap and a leap effectively. And then in terms of other landscape surveying, we have had tree surveys and arboricultural impact assessments. So we are going to lose about 25 metres of section of hedgerow to deliver the vehicle access and the visibility displays. The tree officers reviewed that. They're satisfied. The biodiversity net gain provisions will secure new planting to the same amount plus 10% gain as an offset. There are 5 trees within the site, all are proposed to be retained and protected during construction. So again, schemes considered acceptable subject to securing those conditions, securing the obligations for the lap and leap and the tree protection measures. And then just trying to wrap it up. So in terms of other matters, planning obligations, so NHS Somerset recommended financial contribution towards nearby GP provision. Just wanted to give a quick update on that to members from what was in the report. We received a revised letter from NHS Somerset, they changed their methodology for the calculation. So the figure that's quoted in the report is slightly different from what they're actually seeking. It's actually gone up, so by about 2,000. So instead they're seeking 23,167. If members are minded to approve, it would be looking for that higher figure, and that's been accepted by the applicant. And we will look to secure that through Section 106 legal agreement. Just in terms of other conditions, I mentioned local labour agreement condition will also be imposed on the permission given the size of the site. So just in terms of wrapping things up, planning balance and recommendation, there is conflict with the local plan in terms of the policy T4. We've got to consider that in the round in terms of the council's inability to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, which is currently at 4.17 years. Now there is 40% affordable housing proposed, and that does attract substantial weight. We consider the site is well located. It represents a logical extension to the village. It isn't going to extend out into open countryside, given the sort of containment within the existing residential development to the south, the agricultural complex to the north. We do have to apply the tilted balance, and we do not consider there are any adverse impacts that were significant in demonstrating outweigh benefits. So in our view, it does represent sustainable development, and therefore our recommendation is to grant planning permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. We have 2 speakers on this application, and I'd first like to invite Councillor Anthony Betty, Overy Parish Council, please. You'll have 3 minutes. We haven't got the clock, unfortunately, but it's up on the screen now. So, yeah, whenever you're ready to start, we'll stop the clock.
Good, Darren. Overy is identified in the Sedgemoor local plan as a Tier 4 settlement where any limited development is considered appropriate to meet local needs. This proposal represents a significant expansion of our village, approximately a 12% increase in housing, and is neither proportionate nor justified by the evidence of local need. Firstly, the proposal is in the wrong location of the village. The site is accessed from a busy road with fast-moving traffic outside the village boundary and is not a sustainable location for new housing. The application also fails to address the actual housing needs of Overy. The parish council's housing needs survey identified the need for smaller affordable homes for local people and young families, not a predominance of large 4-bedroom properties, which is mentioned in the report. Existing larger homes remain for sale in the village, demonstrating there is no shortage of this type of housing. This proposal simply does not reflect the needs of our community. Furthermore, this proposal conflicts with a number of key policies in the Sedgemoor local plan. Policy S2 seeks to direct new housing to the most sustainable location. As Overy is a Tier 4 settlement, development should be limited, proportionate, and most identified local needs. This proposal outside the settlement boundary does not do so. Policy T4 requires safe and sustainable access for all. There is no continuous footpath linking the site to the village, as there is currently a third-party fence that separates the affordable homes that are currently there and this other, the fields. Policy CO1 and CO2 promotes sustainable communities where residents can safely access local services without undue reliance on the private car. This proposal fails that test. Finally, policy D25 seeks to avoid conflicts between neighbouring land uses. Placing new houses immediately adjacent to established working farm risk future complaints about odour, noise, and normal agricultural operations, potentially restricting a long-established rural business that has served the community for many years. Residents have questioned the accuracy of the traffic survey. These remains insufficient detail regarding the proposed local area of play and its future management. No meaningful sustainable measures such as solar panels improvements to pedestrian infrastructure. Members, this is not a case of opposing development for the sake of it. Every parish council recognises the need for new homes and supports sustainable growth that generally meets local needs. However, development must be in the right location, provide safe access, respect the rural character of our village and comply with the adopted local plan. In our review, this proposal fails those tests. For those reasons, Overy Parish Council unanimously rejects this application and asks the committee to refuse the planning application or to seek a site visit by members to come and see our issues in person. Thank you.
Thank you. You've raised some issues there, which I'll ask the officer to address once we've had the other speaker. Thank you. Can I invite Ollie Anderson, please, planning agent? And you'll have 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start and we'll set the clock.
Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. The application before members is with a clear officer recommendation for approval, subject to a Section 106 agreement and conditions, all of which have been agreed with the council. The officer's report fairly identifies the central planning matter that the site lies outside but immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary of Waversley, with all other technical matters resolved. And whilst officers identify a conflict with policy T4, that must be considered in the context of the council's housing land supply decision. Somerset cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply in the north area, with the supply standing at 4.17 years, and the tilted balance is therefore engaged, and permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this instance, the only adverse impact identified is the technical policy conflict with T4. Officers have applied that balance and concluded that the benefits of this scheme outweigh this identified technical conflict, and we agree that national policy just suggests this is the only logical conclusion. The site is well related to the village. It adjoins Peppard Close, an existing affordable housing scheme, and sits immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. Officers describe the development as a logical extension to the settlement, with the development reading as infill opportunity rather than an isolated development in the countryside. Any conflict with policy T4 is therefore technical and not rooted in harm to the character of the area. The most important benefit of the scheme is the delivery of much needed affordable housing. The proposal will deliver 16 affordable homes secured through the Section 106 agreement and subject to a local lettings policy. That's a significant benefit for Overy, as the recent housing needs survey identified 12 people need affordable rented property. That's now increased to 22. This is therefore a scheme which responds directly to an identified local need for affordable housing. We recognise that local residents have raised concerns in relation to highways, drainage, infrastructure and amenity. Those matters have all been carefully considered through the officer's report, and members will note that all technical matters have now been resolved, with no technical consultees raising an objection to the scheme. Specifically, the Highway Authority has no objection. The proposed access has been assessed, a road safety audit undertaken, and the expected trip generation is modest. Further, there's a continuous footway available from the proposed site to the primary school to encourage sustainable means of travel. On drainage, the Environment Agency, the LLFA, are satisfied, and the Drainage Board raises no objection subject to the recommended conditions. With ecology, the council's ecologist raises no objection, with biodiversity net gain secured through the Section 106 agreement and the conditions as well. So this is not a case where members are being asked to accept unresolved technical harm. There are no outstanding objections from the technical consultees subject to the conditions. Instead, members are being asked to balance the liberty.
Mr. Anderson, just to say your time is up.
Okay. You're going to cut it there?
Oh, I think so, yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Thank you. Dean, is there anything you wish to respond to in terms of councillor Betty's?
Yeah, there's quite a bit to pick up there. I'm happy to sort of try and go through it and then take any questions we've got afterwards. I mean, I know that, and if I apologize if I miss anything, I'll try and touch on as much as possible. I know it said to the site is access off a busy road. I mean, it is an A road, that's acknowledged, but but as stated in the report, we've got compliant visibility displays that would be expected for the speed limit. They've done speed surveys and road traffic safety audits, which highways are satisfied that, so examined potential things like visibility, how much, what it means for vehicles turning in and out of the sites, and overall they were satisfied. So we're satisfied on that basis. It does provide a safe means of access. Especially mentioned that it does not meet the local affordable need, but the affordable units in terms of what we require would be secured by the Section 106 agreement. So because there'll be a need for certain types and sizes of units. Now that the Section 106 agreement will secure that the application that comes forward provides those sizes of units to make sure it's meeting the needs of the people that are currently resident in the village. So I saw reference to the 4-bedroom houses, but we haven't got a layout, we haven't got specifics of the dwelling sites at the minute, but those details will be what's needed for the community will be secured through the Section 106 agreements. There was talk about no continuous footway. I think if I just go back to the layout plan, I think I know what that refers. So the scheme was amended partway through its submission because of, if you can see where. Yeah, so I think originally it was intention to provide footway along this sort of southern part of the site into the edge of into Pepper's Close, where there looks like there's verge, but that turns out there was a third-party land issue and that couldn't be delivered. So the scheme was amended partly through its submission, which is why there's footway provision coming into the back of Pepper's Close now instead at the end of their parking area. And then that sort of drop curve uncontrolled crossing is in this sort of location just outside Pepper's Close. So you won't have footways from the vehicle access. The vehicle access will be vehicle only. The footway connections would be sort of coming through here, and then members of the public can cross the road there and then walk back into the village there. So I think that's what that reference to a continuous footway not being provided is. It was part of an earlier version of the scheme which was amended. In terms of the farm odor issue, I mean, that was the impacts on the farm. I mean, as I indicated, the application has been subjected to detailed assessments, and which have been scrutinised by our environmental health team. But they noted some low impacts. There's mitigation proposed, and they're satisfied that that addresses those issues. Ms. Betty also mentioned that there are no details of local area of play and how that will be managed. That's so that Section 106 will secure, so there'll be management details to be provided as part of that. Obviously, we don't know where they're located yet. That's part of the reserve matters application, but the provisions are there to secure them. There was comment about solar panels. There aren't specifically, we haven't got those details at the minute. My view on this is that building regulations, in terms of what you need to meet your SAP specification, is significantly higher than it used to be, and lots of new properties have to demonstrate how they are meeting the SAP requirements under building regulations. Almost certainly they need to require some level of renewable energy generation to be able to meet that. It doesn't necessarily have to be in solar panels, that can be through things like air source heat pumps, but it's usually some combination of that. And inevitably that has to happen, otherwise they won't meet their building regulations. So I'm happy to hear any comments on that point. I think that's most of the points, but I'll pick up any others as well. Thank you.
Okay, open it up to members now. Are there any questions, comments? Can I will kick off as there's not a rush at the moment. On paragraph 11.6, it's mentioned because the affordable housing is an important part of this application, I think. And paragraph 11.6 says policy T4 requires any market housing to be justified by viability evidence. No such appraisal has been submitted. As a result, it has not been demonstrated that market housing is necessary to enable delivery of affordable provision, and the proposal conflicts with this aspect of the policy. Could you hopefully give us some assurance that the affordable housing can be delivered.
That paragraph relates very much to what the policy position is if you're trying to bring forward a site in something like Oakwood. Now, the application wasn't submitted on that basis. It was just submitted as we can bring forward a scheme. It will provide a certain amount of affordable housing, and I've had to analyse the scheme against what the policy position is just to tease out what the conflict is. But obviously we are given the application. The affordable housing that's proposed as part of this application, notwithstanding the conflict in significant weight, that will need, so the section 106 will secure that. If for any reason the applicant say they get permission and say they wanted to come in and change the scheme, I think that's maybe what you're alluding to, maybe reduce down the affordable housing provision, which is kind of the basis on which maybe we're recommending to you that this should be approved. That would have to be done through a new planning application or an amendment to this planning application, but it's a planning application nonetheless. And you would apply the same balancing exercise to this. And if you're reducing the affordable housing provisions, then the balance is going to tip much more negatively against the scheme if the one thing that's making it acceptable starts to fall away. Now, we can never predict exactly what, we can't second guess what an application will do. But I think, in my experience, when developers bring forward fibre land supply sites, they are generally trying to tick all the policy criteria as much as possible. They want to provide the affordable housing, they want to provide it because actually it helps with that tilted balance argument, and actually trying to remove some of those obligations is going to make their objective much harder to obtain.
Thank you. What's the hand?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm, because it's not unknown for once properties are built, for the contractors to say that they can't find a housing agent to take on the affordable homes, and therefore the 106 gets changed to fit in with that. I mean, is there any guarantee when they come to planning application that they must have a housing association in place before the building can take place?
I was going to say that again comes down to wording in the 106 in terms of there is a criteria in terms of there is a list of approved providers with the local authorities. There's a number of providers that we work with developers to try and attach them to specific registered providers to ensure delivery of the affordable housing. In the event that becomes problematic, that's when the affordable housing team launches into negotiation with the developer. There is the housing market doesn't enable that transfer to happen. But again, if that doesn't happen, that's a change to what's in the 106. It's a change to what's in the resolution before members. So at the very least, it'd be a deed of variation to change the 106. And under the new scheme of delegation, a deed of variation of a major application that's been determined by committee comes back to committee to have a look at. So we have got a number of strategies and we work positively and proactively with developers to avoid that scenario. But it's not completely impossible that that would happen. But if it would happen, there would be oversight of it.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Thank you. I think to some extent we've got a committee, like I have a lot of sympathy with some of the views that have come from the parish council, but we have a 5-year land supply, which we have this tilted balance in place. So the government basically upped our numbers of how this deliver. It's not that this authority has failed to meet its original targets, it's that they changed the target. So we're now in a situation where we have one arm tied behind our back, basically. Again, I do have sympathy in terms of coming out to that main road, but our own highways department have not objected to it, which leaves us with a difficulty as a committee to try and then object to that. So we do have some difficulties in addressing some of the legitimate concerns I think the parish have got. From the discussion we just had about the affordable. When Mr. Kitchener was introducing this, it was mentioned that obviously this is an exceptional site, but that the applicants actually have applied for it as an exception site. So I'm just wanting reassurance that our 106 will address that it is being treated as as an exception site, because obviously with our exception sites we say 40% is what you've got to do. We've all witnessed ordinary sites that come forward and it's on charity, sorry, viability doesn't quite stack up. And then we all get told, oh, we have to take into account viability. On an exceptional site, that shouldn't be the case, but I just want reassurance that we are gold plating this to make sure that this can't be come back under viability, because we've all been there and suffered from it. And I know Mr. DeVries is aware that, again, we need to be careful on our 106 in terms of what happens to the percentage of affordable housing and how that could change. So I just like reassurance that that is cover bottomed on that. Parish have raised the shop being introduced and whether that is a deliverable benefit. Is there any viability test that's being done on the potential workability of that facility? Because again, we've all witnessed applications that come forward with shops or nursing homes or whatever, and then suddenly a little while later it comes back, oh, terribly sorry, we couldn't find someone to take it on, so we'd like to put a few more houses in. So again, I'd like just reassurance as to how we deal with that. Parish Council raised issues about whether they thought it was appropriate or not to have streetlights on this. I mean, I know from our own village, we've had modern developments without streetlights, but the village doesn't have them. So is that something that could be accounted for? We don't have to necessarily change the character of the village by adding facilities that aren't required. And the last two things I was going to ask was condition 16 about protection of residents from the nuisance of the farm. Is it possible within our explanations of why we're putting that condition on, we could also mention that we're protecting the farm from any potential complaints? Because again, we've had this elsewhere where new development comes in, people say, oh, it's a nuisance. It was there first, but at least if we've acknowledged within our condition that it's a two-way protection, because at the moment it only looks like we're protecting the residents from the farm, whereas it could be also helping to protect the farm from potential issues by building in the benefits for the house. And the last one was on condition 18, which talks about the pedestrian cycle when they need to be done. And it makes the comment is it's before the new development is brought into use. And I just would like some clarification as to what brought into use for the development means. Sometimes it's before the first house is occupied, and that's very clear that what that cut-off is. To say something to be brought into use, I don't quite know what that would mean and how we'd enforce it. So just like clarification on some of those points.
So in terms of the affordable housing part, some of this covered by Dawn in terms of what opportunities there would be to review it if an application came in to change the affordable housing provision. In terms of securing it, I mean, it is in terms of whether we look at like an exception site, it will be subject to a local lettings condition. So you have that hierarchy, that sort of priority given to local residents. Effectively, because we're giving weight to the fact that it's going to meet an overly based need. So that would be a stipulation of the section 106 agreement. So that's in there. And so effectively, any changes from that require future applications. They can't just come in and do it. And that affects the weighting. Now, not to say people don't do it, but I think for types of schemes like this that are only getting approved on that basis, it's definitely a harder ask. You know? In terms of the shop viability, we haven't had any analysis come in as part of the application. And members will probably note that I didn't make significant points about it in my presentation. I haven't say, attribute some benefit, but actually, I think the significant benefit about the application is the affordable housing need, which we know is extant in the village, from the assessments done. And that this scheme is going to, something like 22 residents with need, and this is going to provide 16 units. So that's a significant contribution. On the shop, I'm not going to say that the shop is definitely going to come forward. We'll wait and see, but it hasn't been a major factor in my recommendation. Street lights. I might just come back on that. Condition 16 was about noise mitigation. I think we can amend the reason just to reflect the two-way relationship just in terms of protecting the farm from complaints. Condition 18, I think that's a perfectly fair point about use. I think it probably should be first occupation. We can amend that. And then that just brings back to street light. Yeah.
Thank you. So in terms of street lighting, we are stuck somewhere between planning and highways in terms of the 278 and section 38 agreements. There will be a requirement for them to deliver a certain thing through the highway arrangements. But we have got control in terms of condition 12, which is specifically for lighting for bats. So what can sometimes happen post consent or post resolution is there's a little bit of a dust up between ecology and highway in terms of what lighting scheme is the most appropriate for that location. For the ecological side of it, they will need to do what they need to do through the highway licensing side of it. So there will be negotiation on that front through that condition. But in terms of ultimately the sign off to make sure it's safe for future occupiers will be somewhere between discharge condition 12 and the highway processes.
Sorry, I didn't catch up on the cycleway and the wording that councillor Filmer was doing in your response. I just didn't catch what that was.
Need to amend it to first occupation.
Occupation, okay. That's the button.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Filmer covered an awful lot of issues in his statement to start with. Got them been cleared up, I think. I've just made a few notes myself. Let's be under no illusion, villages need the houses, they need the affordable housing. They're gonna stay. Too many villages with everything closing and going downhill. They need a backward trend. Something like this just might tilt the balance sometimes. Used to be the London Inn in Ossory. A lot of people remember that, I suspect. What a busy place. And something like this might encourage some of the things back. I hope the village shop does come back, but it's so important. You're about people travelling on roads and what have you, so things are more local, but more localism, you wouldn't see these things. Some of I've mentioned solar panels. Would these houses be solar panel?
I've done that a bit before. I mean, I think there's two ways to go about it. My view is, I think building regulations, as I said, are very stringent now, and actually you don't see many new houses built without solar panels because they have to demonstrate to building control that there's a certain level of energy efficiency within the property, and that's not just built fabric, that's actual renewable energy. And I think naturally you will see measures come through as part of the building regulations. I'm not normally to do this necessary to secure them from planning. The alternative, if it's something that members feel strongly about, is to require submission of a sustainability statement as a conditional permission, which they will have to submit details to be discharged, which should include, and we could say could include some provisions such as solar panels. I think there's two ways to do it. My preference is for the former, the building regulations route, but the second is an option as well.
Thank you for that. Okay, but I do feel it's very important, the solar panels. We see a lot of high quality land being covered with solar farms at the moment, and it's not the right way to go. Certainly not the right way to go. Some of these houses were solar panel one way or the other to be a hell of a benefit, I think it would. Okay.
Thank you, councillor. Oh,
I haven't finished up yet. Sorry, it's too short for me. You know that. Right. The farm next door, depending on what sort of a farm it is, it would depend how much smell they're going to get, etc. Flies. So is it a dairy farm, beef farm, sheep farm, arable farm, or what? I really don't know, and I really ought to. So what sort of
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure the answer to that without spending a bit of time working through the odor assessment, which I'm happy to do, but you might need to just give me a couple of minutes to do that, Andy.
Okay, I think that's very important actually, because some farms carry quite a lot of issues, especially when they're close to building sites, etc. It cuts both ways actually, and you know they've got to get on there. It always ripples each one heads to the side or the other. I've got not much else to say, I don't think, to be honest, but my overall view is I would tend to go along with this application. But solar panels are number one, the important one. We've got to start doing that. We're probably 4 or 5 years too late in doing what these states have been put up with no panels at all. And we see our ability to go for solar panel farms, not quite the way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think it's just looking for some more information for us all on the sort of collection of odours.
That's fine. While he's looking into that, I'll just give you some reassurance in terms of
If there is
the,
a problem, Madam Chairman, I bet Councillor Petty, I know the out of order, they can't speak again, but he could tell us, he's bringing forward what sort of a farm it is now.
so, just giving members some assurance in terms of the building regs. So, current version that needs to be assessed for new dwellings is 10.3. So they have to demonstrate compliance with that. And they are obviously through the recommendations of the Climate Change Committee, working on increasing that to make sure all new development is fit for net zero going forward. We're not quite there yet, but there is a very strong drive through building regs in terms of ensuring sustainability and climate change. But obviously, as you've heard from Dean, we have previously covered this with a condition requiring a sustainability statement for the reserve matters. The option is open for both, but we shouldn't really be conditioning something if it's covered by separate legislation. But if members want the comfort, it is available as an option.
I'm just looking at through the assessment. I think the assessment had to work on the. I think it wasn't able to conclude whether it was definitive livestock operation, but has made its conclusions on the assessment that if it were a livestock operation, just to make sure that that's sort of higher threshold of the tests in terms of, because that's where you're more likely to get the odor related issues if there are livestock there. Largely would be overwintering livestock primarily. And its conclusions are based on that. So it's had to be reasonably cautious because there weren't livestock there for them to conclude, but there were the evidence of there being livestock, to be honest, like silage, etc. So that's as much information and assurance I can give on that point, I'm afraid now.
Councillor Slocum.
Thank you. Well, I think the odour is a major problem, major issue, and I've got to be honest, as you know, when I'm not very far from the farm, and at times it can be very bad. So we all know because that's where farm, that's what they do, that's their livelihood. But where I would really draw attention to, Oldbury Parish Council have come in today to explain that they prefer to have smaller homes. They do not want larger homes. I don't like this, it's not nailed down to me, that when we can discuss this with the developer after, I would like to see that if a parish council is saying, this is what they would like, this is what they would prefer, this is where they found their need is for smaller homes, then surely we should be able to not leave it to the developer, not to have a further discussion after. Under this planning authority, we should be able to say, that's what we want.
Yeah, just on that. I mean, the it's an outline application, so we haven't got the details of the dwelling types and sizes. Yeah, but the section 106, particularly in regard to the affordable units, will secure the units that are related to the affordable housing need that's identified in the housing needs assessment. So the housing needs assessment for Oldbury, the one from 2024, it identified a need for 3 1-beds, 4 2-beds, 4 3-beds, and just 1 4-bed. Now it will be looking to secure units of that size for the scheme to come forward. Otherwise, they won't get the approval through the section 106. So that's not to say there might be other units which are non-affordable housing, you know, so just general market housing, because it's a mixed scheme. But the developer will have to provide units to meet what the specific need is in that locality. Otherwise, it's not going to get the approval from the Affordable Housing College when it seeks to discharge its obligations under the section 106.
But can I come back, please? The thing is, it doesn't appear that the Oldbury Parish Council agree with the housing assessment quite clearly. And what I'm saying is our housing assessment correct? Because if you're in a village and you know what's needed and you know by the community, then are we absolutely certain that that is right?
Yeah.
Thank you. So the housing needs assessment is the adopted housing needs assessment for the village. So it is an independent assessment that has been undertaken that we as the authority is standing behind in terms of the volumes and the numbers. It does show sort of in terms of need for rented accommodation, 3 1-beds, 4 2-beds, 4 3-beds and 1 4-bed. And in terms of affordable home ownership needs, there wasn't a requirement for that model. So the 106 would be looking to secure rented accommodation to match the numbers as set out in the housing needs assessment, because that's the adopted evidence that we've got in terms of what the need for that area is. Just looping back round to the noise, the odour assessment as well. The discussions and conclusion of the document does acknowledge that barns at Lowermoor Farm would be used to house livestock in the winter months. But on the basis of that, they were satisfied that there wouldn't be an adverse impact on the future residents. But obviously, the exact layout, window openings, that type of thing, would be subject to the reserve matters application. So, as an outline application, members won't see exactly how many bedrooms each of the properties have. But in terms of the affordable housing delivery, we would be ensuring that the number of bedrooms would be matching what's set out within the housing needs assessment, because that's the additional weight that is tilting this in favour of a positive recommendation for officers. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm now looking for a recommendation. Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation that we have in front of us with the amendments to the various conditions that we've discussed. I would like to suggest that we do go with the belt and braces approach of the sustainability statement to enable us to reassure. And I know we shouldn't duplicate other legislation, but I think because other legislation is evolving at the moment, we're not quite sure where it's going to end up. It's worth making sure we've got that. I think by doing that, we can secure as much as we possibly can for the benefits of the local community from this development, rather than, as I say, because the tilted balance is leaning against, like, we are having to do the best we possibly can for this. So I think that's where I'll move the recommendation with the updated conditions and an additional condition.
Thank you.
Catherine.
Yeah.
I gave the update about the updated NHS contribution figure,
Yeah.
and the recommendation will include that.
Yeah. The 23,167. Yes.
So just for confirmation, so the recommendation at the moment is with the additional sustainability statement condition, amendments to the wording of or the reason in condition 16 to be clear that it's in the interest of the future residential occupants, but also the adjacent business, and alteration to the trigger on condition 18 to ensure it's prior to first occupation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm looking for a second. Councillor Grant, I think all hands are up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy to second that with the conditions, recommendations that have been.
Thank you. So we have the recommendation that planning permission be granted as per the amended conditions. All those in favour, please show. Seven, 4. Any against? Against? And abstentions? 1 abstention. So that is carried. Thank you, members. So that takes us on to planning applications 5 and 6 for Bridgewater Docks. Agenda item 5 is for the planning application itself, and agenda item 6 is for the this is building consent. But we'll be taking the two together so that we don't have two very similar applications presented.
Yeah, no, I think that's like it.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So as introduced, this is a presentation on a full planning application and a listed building consent for a suite of regeneration works at Bridgewater Docks. So including the change of use of the dock to introduce residential and leisure moorings and associated infrastructure, including new secure entrances and pontoons, creation of an active travel route, replacement of the swing bridge, repairs to the Bastille Bridge and associated structures, landscaping and public realm works and engineering works within the basin. So the applications are before committee because the applicant is the council, and that is the only reason. So since the publication of the report, there has been an amendment to condition 19 following on from a late response from the Canals and River Trust. So they just wanted to ensure, oh, I've just realised it's not loaded on the screen, sorry. I will slow down a bit. So condition 19 is to be updated to reflect the latest response from the Canal and River Trust, and that's just to ensure that the steel plating that would be used as a stop loss strategy, which I will come on to, also includes other measures that meet the satisfaction of the Canal and River Trust, as well as the Environment Agency, who had originally requested this condition. So the presentation that I'm about to show you will follow the same format as the report when looking at the main considerations of the scheme. And then this is a list of all the relevant policies and documents. I guess the different additional document for this one is the Bridgewater Vision 2015, which is specific to regeneration works that are within Bridgewater, such as the Celebration Mile, which is the route from the docks down to the train station. So the docks lie to the north of Bridgewater Town Centre, as indicated by the red arrow, and they connect the Bridgewater and Taunton Canal with the River Parrett. So the north, south and west sides of the dock are fronted by modern residential apartments with a historic warehouse on the south side that has been converted to a pub, Admiral's Landing at ground floor. The site extends to approximately 2 hectares and includes the Bridgewater Dock, a small section of the Newton Lock, which is the bit that you walk over just in front of Barrings Mill, and the Sea Lock, which is to the right on that drawing. So the application, the scheme was presented to Quality Review Panel back in August as part of pre-application discussions. So the key comments that were made by the panel identified that this is a major opportunity with potential to generate significant public benefit, that there's been a good engagement strategy undertaken by the applicant team, and that a strong council-backed vision is needed to identify priorities and choices for wider public benefit. The restoration of the moorings and swing bridge should be prioritised as these can generate income. Public realm improvements to be focused on key entrance areas because obviously there's a budget. So where to sort of target the best bits. And brick would be a preferred material with selected areas delivered at a higher quality type of material. And this is to reflect the industrial heritage of the site and the wider Bridgewater in industrial heritage. So I've done it a bit different this time. So I've done pictures and then plans to show which what is proposed for that section of the site, because as you can appreciate, it's quite a large site. So this is from the southern side of the docks looking towards the west. So this bit here where you see this knee rail fencing, that is the pathway that leads on to Anson Way and then Brewery Field. And then obviously to the right, you've got the railings and then the docks themselves. And these are some of the residential property that are along the western boundary. And this is as you carry on that way and turn around the corner and look towards the north. You can see the Barrings Mill there. You can also see we have some pieces of heritage remains, industrial remains. I'm not quite sure how you categorise all of them, such as this steel wheel thing. Oh, sorry, that is not very technical. I just know it is to do with the industrial path and it has been considered appropriately. As you go through that archway and look back, you can see just sort of another view of the current walkway. And this is with your back to the swing bridge. So then if you turn around and face back to the north, you can see the former Barrings Mill. And this is the swing bridge at Newton Lock. So currently this bridge, for those of you who are local will know that when you walk on it, it moves down and it's quite narrow. So this is the bridge that is proposed to be replaced. And then as you cross over the bridge, you can see there's this existing seating area. And then as you carry on round the corner, you can see all this sort of a bit of a mishmash of different hard standing treatments. You've got a bit of tarmac, you have a bit of concrete. And then this is sort of looking back towards the swing bridge and that archway. And then as you go around the corner to start walking along the northern edge of the docks, you can see there's now sort of paving bricks with those concrete bollards, and those are the residential properties that are along the northern side. And this is when you're at the other end of the northern edge of the walkway, looking back. So you can see in the distance that archway building with the swing bridge about there, and as you can see, some of the existing pontoons. So for that section of the docks, which I've effectively walked you through, this plan shows the proposed works for that section. So from the crossing with Anson Way to the south, along the western and northern edges of the docks. So the proposal sets out that as you enter the docks from the footway, there's a new seating area. So it's quite hard to see on these plans because they're so detailed, but these little brown rectangles are effectively new seating areas. And the fat iron wheels, there you go, that's a technical term, relocated as well. So the blue asterisk here indicates the siting of a gateway feature, such as an artistic sign or sculptural feature. Details of that are yet to come forward, so it's just indicating where that could go in the future. So the browny areas on the plan indicate the feature block paving, so block paving that's of a higher quality material, with the yellow areas proposed to be concrete block paving for shared footways. This part of the site would also see the replacement of the existing swing bridge, so that's this red bit here, and also replacement of the existing 1 metre high railings, which edge the dock from the pathway, with 1.4 metre high heritage style black railings along the edges of the footway. In respect of the crossing, so down here, the existing footway is proposed to be widened to allow for a shared pedestrian cycle path, with the existing wooden knee rail to be retained, and the tree crowns of the existing tree, there's 3 trees which I will come on to, but the crowns are proposed to be lifted. The crossing improvements also include a new raised table on Anson Way, so that's that sort of yellowy bit down here, with new bliss attached hull paving slabs. Okay, so this is a view of that pathway that I was just discussing. So this is as you approach from Brewery Field, so as you cross over Anson Way, there's this existing tarmac path. You can see from where it's been walked over on the grass. Effectively, the path is to be widened to there. These are the existing trees that are proposed to have their crowns lifted, and there have been tree surveys undertaken. I'll come on to that further on. But these knee rails are to be retained, and that's quite important because a number of the objections from local residents raise concerns about these knee rails potentially being removed because these verges actually belong to the flats, the residents of the flats, but the knee rails are to be retained. And this is a view of the same path that once you've travelled north along the path, you're in the docks and you look back, and this is what it looks like from that other view. As you can see, people have already kind of walked on the grass. So this is a more zoomed in plan of the widened footpath. So this orange section shows where it would be widened to. A cell web material is proposed under the surface to ensure that the tree roots are protected. And this proposed methodology has been reviewed by the horticultural officer, and he is satisfied with this approach. So focusing a bit more onto the swing bridge replacements, these are some closer views of that bridge. As you can see, it's a fairly modern construction, I think, as well. It's perhaps worth highlighting that this swing bridge is not a historic feature. So these plans show in more detail the proposed replacement swing bridge. So the proposal would have a 3.5 metre wide deck to allow both better access for both pedestrians and cyclists. I don't know if anyone here present has walked along the swing bridge, but you effectively at the moment have to let people go one at a time, and it's quite awkward. And also the condition of the bridge as well, it isn't great. So the works are there to not just improve access, but also repair effectively what is currently there. So it's quite similar in appearance to what's currently there. So the proposal includes sort of the heritage style railings to the edges. And this has been reviewed by the conservation officer and they're satisfied that these plans are acceptable. And there's quite a number of conditions to secure the finer details of these materials because of the historic environment. And there's quite a lot of protected heritage assets in this area, but again, we'll come on to that later on. So once you've walked along the northern section of the docks, you then reach this effectively corner. So as it joins onto the road, so it's all sort of tarmac and gravel, and this is quite near the show how little I know about boating technical terms. There's I think a slipway, yeah, thank you, Vaughan. There's a concrete slipway to allow boats onto the dock. So as you walk along the road, so this is now the Bascule Bridge. So this is the bit that you can actually drive over. So there's traffic lights either side because it's narrow. You can only allow one-way traffic at a time. Currently, the lock mechanisms for the bridge are encased in these quite shabby timber structures. And part of the scheme is to effectively replace these with glazed cases to allow people to be able to see how the bridge works. And alongside that, there would also be interpretation boards and information sort of setting out the history and the engineering behind these structures. So this is the view as you go over the bridge. So this bridge isn't to be replaced. Effectively, it's cosmetic works that are proposed. So a lick of paint, as it were, along with those glazed cases. And this is the second case that would be replaced. So this is then a drawing showing the proposed works that would take part to this eastern half of the site. So this includes a continuation of the block paving as denoted in yellow, with new feature paving at the brown area with a new seating area. So that area we saw where it had that car park for the sort of scrappy tarmac would become this seating area. And also soft landscaping is proposed here, but also throughout, along with another gateway feature as indicated by the blue asterisk, similar to what was shown on the other plan. So the winding mechanisms are proposed to be covered with glazing to allow for viewing, and there would also be a continuation of replacement black railing with the 1.4 metre high heritage style, along with refurbishment works to the Bascule Bridge. So this is a section drawing effectively through the northern path that kind of show you how it would be a shared space, the sightings of planters, and this was requested from the landscape and placemaking officer just to demonstrate how the planting strategy could be delivered to ensure that there was sufficient planting depth. Another reason as well is that the planting has to be provided a certain distance from the edge of the docks to prevent roots from impacting the structural integrity. And the LNFA requested that, and they're now happy with where the planting shown. So we move on to the pontoons. So the pontoons are these effective T-shaped structures. The scheme seeks to effectively reinstate one of these T-shaped structures. It's been removed historically. And previously, those who are local to Bridgewater will know that the docks were previously used to allow for houseboat moorings. So the scheme changing the use of the docks to allow for residential and leisure moorings. So there's an economic benefit as well to this scheme. Just another view of the docks, the pontoon, sorry. So this plan shows which bits, so it's quite hard to see, but this red section here is to be replaced, reinstated, sorry. So currently that is missing. There's just these holes at the moment standing out of the water, and historically there was a pontoon here, so this isn't new in that sense. It's just that it has been missing for a considerable period of time. And in respect of the existing pontoons, they are to remain in situ, so there's nothing proposed to extend these, but they would be refurbished. And then we move on. So once you've gone over the Bascule Bridge and you look to your right, so looking west. So there's the Admiral Landing pub, there's this existing parking area, and this is the area that would be proposed to have waste storage and cycle storage facilities to serve the boats. So this has been shown on this plan. So the orange block is the site, is the bike shelter, and these multicoloured boxes are different recycling and waste facilities. Okay, so that's it for photos. So we move on to the considerations of the scheme. So first of all, principle of development. So the Bridgewater vision, as previously highlighted, sets out specific projects that are required in order for the ambitions of the Bridgewater vision to be achieved. And project 3 within this vision focuses on the Docks Renaissance. That's the title that is given within this document. Additionally, whilst not part of this application, the site is connected by pedestrian links to the brewery field and then the Northgate Yard scheme that recently was redeveloped to the cinema complex. And these are also identified projects within the vision. So I think what I'm trying to get across is that the docks form part of the wider regeneration aim of the town. Furthermore, policy B18 of the local plan states that development proposals in the town centre will be supported that deliver high quality public realm improvements, whilst taking into account important views of and to landmarks, and that integrate with the town centre with the wider town through improved connections and linkages. The docks are not strictly speaking within the town centre boundary, they're 9 metres from the boundary, but they are considered to be well related, and given that the works relate to public realm improvements to an important landmark of the town and seeks to improve these connections to and from the town centre, it is considered that B18 is a relevant policy when making an assessment of this application. As the scheme seeks to propose improved public realm and connections, it's therefore considered compliant with that policy. Other relevant policies when considering the principle of development, it would be D15 of the local plan, which seeks to support schemes that contribute to the objectives of encouraging a diverse and resilient economy and enhance the image of an area as a business location. Furthermore, you have policy D17 that seeks to support proposals for tourism-related initiatives. So the scheme includes leisure moorings and therefore improving the opportunities for water-based leisure in this location and enhancing the docks as a tourist destination or a tourist attraction. And this would then have a resultant economic impact, so the knock-on impacts of it attracting more people to use the site for leisure. And it's also considered that the size and scale of the proposals are proportionate and they don't seek to undermine the heritage importance of the site. And it's therefore considered that the principle is compliant with those policies, the plan. So as well as the economic and tourist benefits, it's probably also worth highlighting that houseboats do contribute towards the housing supply, as non-permanent dwellings are included if they are the main residents of those occupiers and council tax are paid on them. So this application doesn't propose houseboats, but it proposes works to enable houseboats. I think that's probably a clear distinction to make. But nevertheless, it does form part of the consideration. So the application site, it's a sustainable location. It's within the development boundary for Bridgewater, within walking cycle distance of a wide range of amenities typical of a market town. So whilst the application site is in a conservation area, affects a listed building and within the setting of listed buildings, the proposals do not seek to introduce a level of harm that would undermine the historic significance of these features. So therefore, it's not considered there to be a significant or demonstrable harm to the heritage assets, and then in respect of the potential houseboats that the tilted balance would still be engaged. So moving on to more details of the scheme. So heritage assets and visual amenity. So the docks are a grade 2 listed building, and there are a number of other grade 2 listed buildings within the vicinity. So all of these orange crosses on this map are grade 2. They're all grade 2. There's no other grading listed, buildings in this area. So there's a terrace of dwellings out here. There's also the converted warehouse down here, which is grade 2. And these orange crosses down here are gate piers that are grade 2 listed. And these ones up here are also dwellings. So the site is also within the Bridgewater Conservation Area, and the former Barrowings Mill, indicated by the yellow star, is a non-designated heritage asset, so listed on the council. Furthermore, this sort of grey shading are archaeological sites, so all of the application site effectively is within an archaeological site. So Historic England were consulted on the application and they stated that they were offering no advice and defaulted effectively to the council's conservation officer. Initially, the conservation officer wanted further information. That was due to concerns regarding a lack of clarity on the proposals because there were a few errors between the drawings that didn't match up. And following the submission of this additional information, the conservation officer is satisfied that the proposals would not in principle serve to cause harm to the significance of the heritage asset and that appropriate conditions could be used to secure suitable mitigation, such as a method statement, schedule of works, and details of fixtures and materials. Considering archaeology, South West Heritage have raised no objection and have recommended a condition to secure a programme of works with a written scheme of investigation. Moving on to other considerations of visual amenity. So landscape and placemaking initially again requested additional clarification and amendments, similar to the conservation officer actually. And following submission of these revised details, she was satisfied that conditions can be used to secure a hard and soft landscaping strategy, details of the materials and street furniture and fixtures. So similar to the conditions requested by the conservation officer. Moving on to ecology. So the application site is within the buffer zone of 2 county wildlife sites. So the buffer zone is a relevant constraint when considering major developments. It should also be noted that I appreciate there is reference in the report to back consultation zones and that policy. That is an error. Apologies, that is a drafting error. The site is not within a back consultation zone. Ecology reports have been submitted, so preliminary ecological appraisal and Otter and Waterfall technical note have been submitted. These have been reviewed by SES and have raised no objection with the recommendation of conditions to secure mitigation measures, precautionary working method statement, not worming, as I originally wrote in the report, so I hope all those typos are changed, and kept for biodiversity, so construction environment management plan to ensure that biodiversity is safeguarded during the construction phase of the scheme. Rather unusually, the Environment Agency have also reviewed the proposals in respect to protected species, as initially there was a concern regarding eels. So they are satisfied that an eel pass would not be required. They did a walk around the site and the adjoining canal, and they consider there to be minimal opportunity for eels to migrate downstream and return to the Parrett estuary. And that if an eel pass would be required, this would likely be a pump up and over design, and that would increase the risk of eel mortality and difficult to maintain. And considering the limited opportunity for eels to need that route, it's considered the EA is satisfied that it's not needed in this scheme. But nevertheless, they have also recommended conditions to secure a protected species mitigation and management plan. So similar to the views of SES. Right, so moving on to flood risk, power drainage and surface water management. So the application site, probably unsurprisingly, is in flood zone 3A and within the main river buffer of the River Parrett. The sequential test is considered to be passed because the site is within the settlement boundary. So this then moves on to the exceptions test. This requires the vulnerability of the development to be compatible with the flood zone in order to pass, and that the development should demonstrate that the scheme would provide wider sustainability benefits to the community that outweigh the flood risk, and that the development would be safe for its lifetime without increasing the risk of flood elsewhere. So in respect of vulnerability classification, houseboats are not treated differently to land-based buildings and national policy. So a houseboat in respect of flood risk, you have to make the same assessment as if it was a so-called normal, bricks and mortar house. So houseboats are classed as more vulnerable, same as brick and mortar dwellings. So initially, the Environment Agency did object, requesting further information, as they were concerned about mooring details. So, for instance, if the houseboats were moored too tightly, in the event of a flood, they wouldn't rise with the water level, and then they would become inundated. And also they wanted further detail about flood evacuation plans in the flood risk assessment, and also an understanding of the condition of the lock gates that adjoin the docks to the river. So further information was submitted. The objection was sustained, with further detail still required in respect of a strategy to ensure that in the event that the lock gates were to fail, the residents of houseboat moorings would be protected. In response to this, a stop log backup strategy. So this relates to the condition 19 that I provided a verbal update on at the beginning of the presentation. A strategy has been submitted, and effectively this would introduce like a steel plate adjacent to the lock gates to ensure that in the event of failure, there is effectively a backup delivered by this steel panel. So the strategy has been submitted and accepted by the Environment Agency with the recommendation of condition 19, as you saw at the beginning of the presentation. And obviously that has also been amended to reflect the needs of the Canal and River Trust. Moving on to foul drainage. So there's been a number of concerns raised by third parties regarding potential impacts if this isn't suitably managed for the proposed moorings. So the scheme includes a foul water drainage plan, which indicates that a pump out facility is proposed at the northeast corner of the docks, with a proposed new connection to a chamber on the existing foul water pipe, with the connecting pipe from the new facility and other relevant details to be agreed with Wessex Water. The Environment Agency have also commented on foul drainage and have advised that they have not identified any issues with the proposal, and that the connection to the foul sewer is subject to the agreement with Wessex Water. And an informative has also been provided to remind the applicant to engage with Wessex Water. The scheme also includes the proposal of a provision of a specialist chemical disposal unit within the existing marina shower block for chemical toilet waste. And it's therefore considered that the scheme is acceptable in respect of foul drainage, with a proposed condition to secure a suitable foul drainage connection prior to the occupation of the residential moorings. So surface water management. So surface water drainage strategy has been submitted. Setting out the proposals do not impose a meaningful increase of the impermeable area, because you're effectively replacing, not quite like for like, because they are different materials, but you're replacing hard standing with different hard standing. And that the works would connect to the existing drainage system with overland flow routes to the docks in the event of exceedance. Initially, the LLFA wanted further information, and this has been provided, and they're now satisfied, recommending appropriate conditions to secure the drainage scheme, and a CCTV survey as well to demonstrate that the existing drainage systems are of an acceptable standard to allow for suitable drainage. Residential amenities. So as you can see in the photos, there are quite a significant number of residential properties that border the site. Concerns have been raised by third parties regarding the potential for noise and disturbance generation that would arise from the use of the moorings. It's considered within the planning assessment that the distance of the moorings from the dwellings, and that the use is for residential leisure purposes, and that this is a compatible use with surrounding residential properties. So a combination of those things is considered that there would not be a detrimental level of impact on amenity. Environmental health have also been consulted on the scheme, raising no objection, recommending suitable conditions to secure a KEMP, so to protect residents during the construction phase of the scheme, appropriate lighting to ensure that there's no not light spillage, but that lights aren't directed towards residential properties, and also the standard land contamination reporting condition. In respect of the amenities of future residents, so those that may wish to take up the moorings, the scheme is considered to be in a sustainable location, appropriate distance from local amenities, and therefore is considered to be an acceptable place to support a good level of amenity for future occupiers. I want to note that a lot of the conditions proposed relate to highways, active travel, public rights of way. The main reason for that is because of the technical nature of this scheme. It's not typical that they have bridge replacements and all of those things. So that's why a number of conditions relate to that. So there is an existing public right of way as indicated by the purple line, which goes along the northern edge. The rights of way officer has raised no objection, recommending conditions to ensure that details of seating and planting areas are secured prior to works to the footpath. And that's effectively to ensure that they are compatible with each other and that the right of way can remain usable. So moving on to highways, appreciate it's not a car scheme, but highways still need to be involved because of the types of structures that are involved and the active travel links. So initially there was a request for additional information. This has been provided, and following on from this, there was a recommendation of conditions to secure the relevant approvals for the swing bridge, a construction traffic management plan, and a road condition survey as well. Moving on to active travel. So initially concerns were raised regarding the proposed layout, and these are summarised as needing to cross the pavement when entering and exiting Aston Way. There was a suggestion to provide entry and exit slips on the approach for users travelling along Anson Way. So just a reminder, that's the road to the south that the widened path is going to connect to. They also suggested that the path should be widened further, and that the segregated cycle lane along the northern side of the dock should be widened, and there was a preference for shared space throughout. As a response to this, so this is the response from the applicants, sorry, not active travel, that's not clear on the slide. So the applicant set out that there is insufficient width to provide entry and exit slips from Anson Way. Additionally, Anson Way is a cul-de-sac, so it's anticipated low demand that people will be travelling along Anson Way to get onto the docks. Most people would be coming from the south from Brewery Field. The footway adjacent to the crossing is proposed to have ramps with suitable gradients, so cyclists can access this without needing to dismount. The path is being widened, and it cannot be widened any further due to third-party land and trees. The width of the segregated northern cycle path is 2.5 metres, which exceeds the minimum requirement of 2 metres. And a wider segregated cycle path would likely result in an increase in cycle speeds. And also, given the recreational leisure options at the docks, there's sort of a view that people will be milling around, and a segregated cycleway is considered more appropriate than a shared space, particularly along that northern section where you'll have seating areas, soft landscaping too. So people will be, sat there enjoying the docks. So it's considered more suitable to have that segregated area for the cyclists. Sorry, I'll just finish that slide. So this response is being put back to active travel, and they don't object. They consider that those points explain why it hasn't, the scheme has been designed as it has, and they've recommended conditions to secure appropriate signage, because some of the signage indicated on the plans isn't the correct signs for those cycle paths, but that's fine. We've got a condition to cover that. And also a condition to secure suitable corduroy paving. So moving on to the trees, so as seen in the photos, there are 3 trees within the application site. So as the application site is within the conservation area, the trees are protected under section 211 of the Town and Country Planning Act. So if you were to do works to those trees separately, that would require effectively the same application process as a work to a TPO. So a tree survey has been submitted. So there's a cherry and 2 Norway maples, and all of them are considered to be category B. They are outside of the red line, but may be impacted by the proposed works, notably the widened footpath. The report sets out that the trees are in a fair, good condition, with recommendation that some minor reduction is made. Additionally, tree protection measures have been detailed to ensure that the trees are protected during the construction phase of the development. So following on from the initial comments from the tree officer, the scheme has been amended to include this cell web structure under the widened path. And this is a well-used root protection system to ensure that the works can still take place, but at the same time not undermine those roots and damage them. So there's been no objection raised by the tree officer recommending conditions to secure a tree protection plan and an arboricultural method statement. So just a sort of brief comments about the local waterways network. So the site is within the consultation area for the Canals and River Trust. Initially, they raised concerns due to the lack of clarity regarding if boats using the docks, not locks, sorry, good typo there, using the docks would be able to travel onto the canal, and if the potential increased use of the canal has been considered as part of the scheme. So further information from the applicant was provided, setting out that yes, the vessels would be able to access the canal and that appropriate licenses would be obtained from the trust. So there's a lot of other legislation which sets out the licensing requirements for vessels to use those waterways. So no further comment from Canals and River Trust were provided, other than that later comment regarding condition 19, which has been already addressed, and encouragement for the applicant team to engage with the business voting team, and an informative has been provided to that effect. So quickly on sustainability, the Environment Agency and Environmental Health both recommended conditions to secure construction environment management plan. So that includes the management of waste during the construction phase. There's also been a sustainability statement submitted setting out that durable materials are to be sourced from the UK and Europe to minimise carbon footprint, recycling facilities to be provided to manage both construction and operational waste, and also the reuse materials where possible. So a suitable condition is proposed to be imposed if consent were to be granted to ensure that the development is carried out with the aspirations of this statement. The submitted site plan also demonstrates that recycling facilities would be provided to serve the moorings. So just a brief summary of some of these third-party concerns. So some of these aren't material planning considerations, but given the nature of the concerns and the nature of the application, I thought it was worth just summarising this here. So concern has been raised by the Sea Cadets that the proposals would prevent the Sea Cadets from continued usage of the site. So it's understood that the Sea Cadets use the docks currently under an informal agreement, and the proposed works are not considered to significantly impact the space available for those activities. So the reinstatement of the pontoon is further down the docks, and as set out previously, historically there has been a pontoon here. So whilst the proposal would introduce an increase in activity and number of boats that are moored within the dock, there is a potential that the availability of space would be reduced if all of those moorings are occupied. So I've had a number of discussions with the applicant team. I understand they have also been reaching out to the Sea Cadets as well. And the applicant team are willing to engage with the Sea Cadets to understand further what their needs are to create an arrangement going forward that meets the needs of both the Sea Cadet organisation, but also ensuring a viable scheme that does provide an economic benefit. There's also been quite a few concerns raised about existing antisocial behaviour concerns. So in terms of the planning assessment, only designing out crime principles can be taken into consideration when assessing the planning application. So that's things that typically for sort of housing estates, you like to have a natural surveillance of parking areas, things like that. It's considered that in terms of designing out crime, the scheme is acceptable. In terms of concerns about antisocial behaviour, ultimately that would be a police matter if antisocial behaviour was to take place in the future. So to sum up the end of the presentation, I'm sure you're glad to hear. So the proposal is for public realm improvements, part of the Bridgewater Town Deal Fund. So that is money that has been secured in order to deliver key regeneration projects. The principle of the scheme is considered to be accepted, part of the Bridgewater vision, encouraging tourism and economic opportunities, and instilling civic pride in the town and improving the active travel offer. The scheme is considered to enhance a key landmark of the town and help safeguard an important heritage asset. Additionally, houseboats can count towards 5-year housing land supply. There's no outstanding objections from consultees and appropriate conditions can be used, and therefore the officer's recommendation is to approve both planning permission and listed building consents subject to relevant conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray. We have one speaker for both agenda items 5 and 6, and that is Matteo Espinosa. I hope I can pronounce that correctly. Applicant planning agent. You are welcome to have 6 minutes to cover both elements. Okay, just let us know when you're ready to start, and we'll set the clock.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Dear members and chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the proposals for the restoration and regeneration of Bridgewater Dock. This application represents a significant step forward for Bridgewater aiming to transform the dock into a vibrant cultural and visitor destination that celebrates the town's rich industrial heritage. The vision is clear: to create an attractive, accessible place for residents and visitors alike, with enhanced connectivity to the town centre via the Celebration Mile. The project is part of a group of 11 projects funded by the Bridgewater Town Deal, which secured £23 million to unlock growth, create places and spaces, diversify town centre uses, and instill civic pride back into Bridgewater. In order to do this, the scheme proposes a range of improvements, including the restoration of the dock, introduction of residential and leisure moorings, supported by new secure entrances and pontoons. It also includes the creation of an active travel route around the dock, improving pedestrian and cycle access, linking seamlessly to the wider town. Replacement of the outdated swing bridge at Newton Lock with a new, wider bridge and refurbishment of the historic Bascule Bridge, both designed to respect the site's heritage and improve safety for all users. Comprehensive landscaping and public groundworks are also included, including new street furniture, lighting, and interpretive materials to better reveal the dock's history. These proposals are not only about physical improvements, they're informed by extensive community and stakeholder engagement, with 90% of consultation respondents supporting the regeneration. The scheme has evolved in response to feedback, ensuring it meets local needs and aspirations, and has been subject to a quality review panel and pre-application advice. Importantly, the application aligns with local national planning policy. It supports the Bridgewater vision by improving public realm, facilitating active travel, and increasing opportunities for water-based leisure activities. The scheme delivers clear public benefits. It will create a safer, more attractive environment, encourage healthy lifestyles, enhance biodiversity, and promote stewardship of the dock. The proposals also address flood risk, ecological impacts, and ensure that the minor incursion into designated green space is justified by significant public benefits. There are no objections from the local flood authority or the Environment Agency and the Canal and River Trust. This application is a catalyst for further investment and regeneration. It calls for the development plan and material considerations, and I urge the committee to grant planning permission without delay, so the Bridgewater Docks can fulfil its potential as a celebrated asset for the town and its people. Moving on to the listed building consent. Bridgewater Dock is one of the town's most important heritage assets. Opened in 1841, it played a vital role in the growth of Bridgewater as a trading and industrial centre, and remains a defining part of the town's identity. The dock, tidal basin, locks, bridges, and associated structures are Grade 2 listed and form a key part of the Bridgewater Central Area and Docks Conservation Area. The proposals seek to restore and regenerate this historic asset whilst ensuring its long-term future. The vision is to create a vibrant cultural, leisure, and visitor destination that better connects the dock with the town centre and wider active travel network. The scheme will deliver a high-quality public realm, improved walking and cycling routes, enhanced landscaping, heritage interpretation, refurbished marina facilities, and new residential and leisure moorings that will bring activity and life back to the dock. Importantly, the proposals have been designed to better reveal and celebrate the dock's heritage significance. The scheme includes the sensitive refurbishment of the historic Bascule Bridge, improvements to its appearance, and the creation of an interpretive display around the historic lifting mechanism so that visitors can better appreciate its engineering and history. The heritage statement consistently concludes that the proposals will cause no harm to the listed buildings, conservation area, or other heritage assets. Instead, they will enhance their settings, improve public appreciation of the dock's history, and help secure the long-term future of this important asset through renewed use and investments. There have been no objections from the council's heritage team in that respect. This is a unique opportunity to restore one of Bridgewater's most significant historic places, celebrate its heritage, encourage tourism and active travel, and create a destination that residents and visitors can enjoy for generations to come. For those reasons, I respectfully ask members to support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now open up to members. Councillor Bolt, Brian, Hendry, Oakham, and then myself.
It's taking shape at last. It's been a long time coming. One thing with the residential, hopefully the houseboats, where the parking for the cycles are, is that also going to include parking for the occupants?
Yeah, so it's an existing car park, so that they are going to lose some spaces, but it's not considered to be a significant enough loss that would undermine the parking level that would serve those boats.
Thank you. Just one more thing, that slipway that you talked about, I remember when it was put in, it wasn't supposed to be at that angle. Is that going to be sorted out within this regeneration?
I don't know is the answer to that. I'd have to have a look at the plans. Yeah.
Take that as a action, thank you. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions, really. Is there any standards of these houseboats that will be there? Because I can remember in the past, there was some that sort of after this, it is a great system, it looks really good. But if there's no sort of standard of what these houseboats can be, it could end up spoiling what is a great design. That's my first question. And the second one, is there fishing allowed in the docks? I'm only asking that because I don't know.
Okay, so the second question is probably a bit easier to answer. So currently, no fishing is allowed. I know it takes place, but it is allowed. And I think with the Environment Agency, off the top of my head, that in their comments set out that they're aware of the unauthorised fishing activities, that moving forward, that needs to be managed a bit better in terms of enforcement. In terms of the appearance of the houseboat, so the application is for the moorings, not for the houseboats. I think that's probably what I would say. I don't think we can control the houseboats. No, there's a lot of sorry, shake of the head, not. We can't control what the houseboats look like, unfortunately.
Could I come back on that, Cliff? I mean, with all the money and the effort going into this, I find that really strange that you could get something that comes in there, and it makes a pig's ear of the whole thing. So I'm really surprised that there's no way that you can look at what goes in there. Thank you. Just a question.
And just to follow up from that, Councillor Grimes, ultimately, the use of the moorings would be managed. So if complaints are raised about a particular boat, for instance, then whoever's managing the use of the docks would be able to do something about it. But it falls outside of planning. I think it's probably the key point.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. I don't speak for any other council, only myself, this is just me speaking. I don't even know why this has been brought before Planning North at all. You're asking me to comment on things like docks, swing bridge, houseboats, moorings. I've got no knowledge of that whatsoever, nothing. So I cannot comment. I've got no input in this case whatsoever. I know it's a council application, do realise that. However, shouldn't this gone to strategic or engineer something like that, as opposed to Planning North here in this committee room? Because there is no input at all. I can get nothing about docks and swing bridges, nothing at all. Thank you.
I can just come back on that, Councillor Hendry. So I'm not a specialist at all either in any of these structures. So we are led by the technical specialist, and ultimately they are not objecting. I think that is the key take home. So they are satisfied that the technical side of it is acceptable. We've got relevant conditions to reflect the technical nature of the scheme, and this is the correct arena for this. I appreciate what you're saying. It's a lot of different things, isn't it, to consider.
Ms. Slocum.
Oh, and I'd like to congratulate the officer on the amount of work that this is. Your presentation today was brilliant. The detail. I think that this is long awaited. I think, well, I'm here to celebrate the to get the residents back in their houseboats where they want to be and where they love. And I think I'm absolutely thrilled to bits with this. And I certainly like to move the recommendation The only caveat I wanted to ask was that we don't lose any of the historic. I didn't know what those things were called, the wheels either. I always look at them, but the cranes or whatever they're called. I don't like the idea of them being moved. I like the historical value of keeping all those bits, and I'm sure they will do their very best. But absolutely, this is so long overdue. And I'm sure many people will rejoice today that this is going to be hopefully passed and we can get on with the job. I'm not an expert, but I've lived here all my life. And I want to see the docks restored to their former glory when they were many years ago. Over 30 years ago, they looked, when the docks was changed, it looked beautiful. And I think we want to get them back. But also the most important thing for me is to get our residents in our houseboats back on the docks. So thank you very much for what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slocum. In terms of the reciting of some of those heritage assets, so as part of the assessment of the scheme, the Conservation Officer asked for effectively a schedule of all the historic features of the docks. There was then an agreement between the applicant team and the Conservation Officer that was a robust list of all of the assets. And yes, some of them are being recited, but the Conservation Officer is happy with where they're being relocated. My understanding is it's to allow for sort of better legibility of the historic background of the site. And ultimately, there are still conditions as well about to finesse those details even further.
I'd like to come in here as Councillor Slocum represents the north half of the docks and I represent the southern half of the dock. So I'd like to share the comments. This is such a welcome application that has been a long time coming. Such an important heritage site for the town and has huge potential, and that you'll have seen from the photographs that look rather neglected over the last few years. So I would like to second the officer's recommendation. But there's some other speakers. Councillor Bradford.
Madam Chairman, a terrific presentation, a lot to remember. Well done. Need a drink after that, actually. I'd like to endorse what our chairman said and Councillor Slocum, very much so. If you've got water, you can always make it of great interest. And Bridgewater has always been a bit like that. I look forward to the day we can get on a little barge down at Bridgewater docks and go right to the Bridgewater and Taunton Canal up to the boat centre at North Newton. It used to be possible, everything's working. Certain bridges aren't working, it's not quite the same. A couple of little things on this. The reason why no fish about, because I see offers were mentioned in the presentation. Well, if you know about fish, I had a lot of fish once, and a couple of offers soon sorted them out. I don't camera 500 4 nights. Horrible little thing. And why people encourage some of these things in some of the places for wildlife, I really don't know. But there's one step forward and about 10 back. That's my own personal view, and I've experienced it. I know what I'm talking about. Secondly, barracks. I've traded for barracks for 40 years. This time of year we've dinner tipping our corner, trading, how it was done. I wouldn't like to think that was left in the same manner as the cinemas up at the Bridgewater. No, that's it. The one, we have been left there a long time. It doesn't go for Bridgewater. I know Barry's about something in the pipeline for an awful lot of time what they want to do, and it'd be very nice to see something happen. The character of Barry's, which is a long household family name, still staying with it. But I do think it's very exciting for Bridgewater, something like this. And if you've got water, you've always got access, and you can always create things. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bradford. Just on the topic of Barron's Mill, so obviously it falls outside the application site. It isn't listed on the local heritage list, so it's not listed building, but it has got some protection because it's locally listed. And I think the overarching vision is that once more activity is introduced to the docks and it's a more viable place for economic purposes, and then be more of a push to expand regeneration works. Obviously, that's a hope and an aspiration, but you've got to start somewhere. I think it's probably what I would say.
Thank you. That one thing I'm going to say is the longer you wait on all these things, the more the costs go up and each thing become unviable. And a lot of these listed to protect your buildings, if you become unviable, protect them anymore. That's why they go untouched. It doesn't happen because it's not economic reality, not like it used to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bradford. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. It was just a quick question about the houseboats. you out and come back and things like that.
So in terms of planning, that they would have permission to be permanent moorings. I understand there's other license requirements that they might have to obtain, but again, that's different legislation that falls outside planning.
Thank you, councillor Filmer.
I've just answered my question on that one as well, but also welcome the presentation that we've had. I think there's a lot of detail in there, but it was very clearly put across. In terms of, I know we can't obviously condition house votes through planning. But bearing in mind the number of listed structures, the number of listed buildings there is important. Whatever goes in there doesn't detract from that. Are we able to have a condition just confirming that there is a management in place? Rather like we do with a construction management plan, we don't detail it. We say there's got to be a management plan, so that at least we can have a condition to say that there is a management plan to make sure that nothing that is introduced into there actually is detracting from the whole scheme and the listed structures that are around there.
Thank you, councillor Filmer. I'm not sure we could in terms of planning. I think in my mind, it's comparable to say you grant consent for a load of houses and someone doesn't keep their front garden tidy. There's nothing planning could do that. And I think this is comparable to that, you know, effectively it's someone's private residence. And I think that would be down to whatever rules that the management organisation that seek to manage the, I don't know, it is necessarily the right word, but there would be rules I expect the future residents to adhere to. But then that is outside of planning. That would be my understanding. I don't know if Dawn agrees. So.
Maybe ask a question of you, because your knowledge is obviously a lot better than mine. There is obviously a management company that looks after that. Is that involved in this authority?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Just checking. The aim is that there will be management of the day-to-day running of the docks. It's not in place now, but that is sort of the next stage in discussions, and certainly the condition of the vote has been discussed as part of that management. Yeah. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Amelia, it's really interesting. I'm just echoing what people are saying. Really, it's just fantastic to see this application come forward. And I think you kind of stole the words that I was going to say, really, in a way, with in terms of this is a really great start. And I hope it does really kickstart the economic activity, but also perhaps attracting a bit of tourism to Bridgewater. So rather than being a place that people pass through, we're going to encourage people to stop here. And I think the docks. This is a really great start for that, leading on to the management programme and just really sort of regenerating that area. So I'm really, really pleased to see it come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Bruce.
Thank you. So we have a proposer, councillor Slocum, and myself seconding the officer's recommendation. But this is for agenda item 5 first, and this is with the update to condition 19 regarding the introduction of steel gates as a backup.
Yes, it's just additional wording to consider when discharging the condition. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take that first, and that's for the application itself. So all those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous. And then we'll go to agenda item 6, which is the building consent. We'll need a proposer and a seconder for that. Also, councillor Slocum.
Oh, sorry.
I'm second. Again, all in favour, please show. Yeah, thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Millie, for the epic presentation. And thank you for the questions and debate. Can I suggest we do have 4 applications still to get through before 1 o'clock, but can I suggest a 10-minute comfort break so that we can do that in comfort? But we do need to be back by 1:15 at the very latest. Thank you.
And it's like a flash of new ways, so I'm going to go upstairs. I'm trying to get back into my house. Just ask. Yeah.
All that.
It's just right.
We looked in at one of the company boss.
It's that, yeah.
Okay, Shanta, would you like to begin the presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a forward planning application for the erection of two south-built dwelling at 22 Bath Road, Ashfield. The main considerations will include the principles of development, design and impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on residential amenity, highways, and ecology. Now, the site is located as roughly indicated with the red ring. It's on the south of Bath Road, the main route that leads eastwards into Ashcott. I've shown you this slide because it indicates the distance from the settlement boundary. The settlement boundary is shown as a green line towards the east. It's approximately 480 metres along the Bath Road. Also, while I've got the slide, it indicates there is a footpath on both sides of Bath Road that leads eastwards into the village. And close to the relatively modern or new housing development opposite Old Nursery Drive, there is a footpath link that leads towards the playing fields and the school beyond. Now the site, I'm going to show you a couple of site location plans just to give you the context of the site and the surrounding area. And there you can see the site comprises currently of a large agricultural building. It has a benefit of Class Q fallback consent for two dwellings, but that does expire later on in the month. This application is not relying on that fallback. This application is actually for two self-built dwellings. There are currently two existing accesses into the site, and the site also, or surrounding the site in connection with the ownership, also includes the main house, a main dwelling here, together with its annex. There's a vehicular access to the west of this dwelling. There's also vehicular access to the east, and this proposal seeks to utilise the eastern access. It's proposed to erect two detached 4-bedroom self-built dwellings. Each would have its own parking for 3 cars, adequate turning to the back of the car parking spaces, and it would utilise the existing access. This shows the design of the dwellings. They are very similar, but they are handed and they would be finished in red brick and tiles. These are photographs of the site. This is looking directly into the drive off Bath Road. Presently, you can see the existing agricultural building. Here, adjacent to the drive, is the neighbouring property with its garage and outbuildings, and the other side is a detached dwelling. This is looking in the same position, but looking along westwards, along Bath Road, and this is in the same position, looking eastwards, showing the character of the houses within the street scene. This is entering the drive, which is proposed to be utilised. This to the side is the neighbour's garage, and this here is the barn itself. On the slide on the right hand side shows the annex, which is linked to the main house next door. These are all of the existing barn, which I say has extant consent for conversion to 2 dwellings. This is the visibility at the existing access, the access to be utilised. The left-hand side shows the visibility westwards. The right-hand photograph shows the existing visibility looking eastward. Now, in terms of the principle of the residential development, the application is for 2 self-built dwellings. In respect of self-built dwellings, policies CO2 and D9 of the local plan are relevant. In this case, the site is not in an isolated location, but it is well connected to the village of Ashcott. There is evidence of local need for plots within the village, and the applicants have a connection to the village, and they are on the self-built list. They've also been involved in the design of the dwellings, and it's considered that the principle of self-build in this location is acceptable.
In terms of the design and impact on the character of the area, as could be seen from some of the photographs, there is a mix of character of dwellings along Bath Road. They range from red brick, natural clay tiles, natural stone, some slate render, and red brick. There isn't a distinct character that is formed along the road. This application seeks to provide 2 detached dwellings finished in red brick with tiled roofs. While the building is outside of the settlement boundary, the buildings would be on site of the existing large agricultural building, and it's considered that there is an opportunity to enhance the character of the area here. The buildings would not be set down south as far as the southern edge of the agricultural building. They would be slightly further forwards. There is a slope, the land slopes away from north to south. And so they would be, while they would be higher than the existing agricultural building, they wouldn't be particularly dominant due to the land levels. In terms of the footprint, the dwellings would be smaller than the existing agricultural building and smaller than the consented scheme. It's considered therefore that this would be an appropriate development in this location and would not adversely impact on the character of the area. In terms of residential amenity, due to the separation distances from the dwellings and the surrounding properties, it's not considered that there would be any undue overlooking, loss of light, visual domination. And in terms of noise and disturbance to the neighbouring property adjacent to the existing drive, there are intervening structures like the garage and an outbuilding adjacent to the drive. And given that this drive is also used and currently used to gain access to the site, it's not considered that the addition of 2 dwellings would have an adverse impact on the amenity of neighbouring property. With regard to highways, transport and access and parking, as I have been saying, the existing access would be utilised. The visibility at that access is adequate. Each dwelling would have adequate parking. They would have 3 spaces each. There would be adequate space to turn so that they can enter the highway in forward gear. In terms of linkage to the village, it is well linked to the village due to the existing footpaths on both sides of the road and also the link via the northern side, which takes you off Bath Road towards the playing field and the school. And therefore, in terms of highway safety, the proposal is considered to be acceptable. With regard to ecology, the site is situated within a Foss Bay catchment area, and a nutrient neutrality assessment and mitigation strategy has been submitted. It's been confirmed that there's currently no wastewater discharge from the site, and that the site, when operational, would discharge wastewater to the water treatment works. Therefore, given that the wastewater would be discharged outside of the catchment area, it would have no impact on the Somerset Levels and Moors Special Protection Area and Ramsar site. With regard to biodiversity net gain, because this is a self-built development, that would be exempt. However, there would be a need for a unilateral agreement to ensure that the occupation of the dwellings are in accordance with self-build policy. Given that the principle of the development meets the policies CO2 and D9, given that it's not considered that the proposed development would have an adverse impact on the character of the area, residential amenity, highway safety, or biodiversity, the recommendation is to grant consent with the conditions in the agenda, together with the unilateral agreement to tie the dwellings to that in accordance with biodiversity net gain. In accordance with self-build. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanta. We have one speaker on this application, and that's James Benton, the planning agent. So James, if you'd like to come forward, please. As always, you have 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. I won't take up too much of your time. Shanta's covered the pertinent points in her report very succinctly. And before we submitted the application, we did undertake a pre-application meeting on site. And this current application has stemmed from the positive feedback received at that meeting. As for the case officer's report, from a policy point of view, the application ticks the relevant requirements. This is a self-built proposal for the two applicants. We're here today as the parish council have raised concerns over the proposal, concerns that the case officer has point by point addressed in a report on page 123 of the agenda. The site is well related to the built form of the Tier 3 village of Ashcott. A self-built need has been proven, and aside from the parish council's concerns, no other statutory consultee has raised any concern, and equally importantly, in this case, no neighbours have raised any concern. To conclude, we believe the proposal absolutely accords with the relevant self-built planning policies. Great consideration has been given to the proposal through both the pre-app and the formal application process, and we respectfully ask members to follow the considered recommendation of your officer, grant permission for the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Member. And you, Councillor Bolt, Councillor Filmer, Councillor Bradford.
Just wondering if we could have a look at slide 6. I think that was just the pictures of what the build's going to be like. Yes. Yeah, thank you. That's okay. I think one of the members will be quite happy they have chimneys. But all the other houses did.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Filmer.
It was just a query if I can, because I find myself in a strange situation that I agree with the recommendation, but I'm not sure I agree with why we're recommending it, but it makes sense. The query I've got is there is a class Q, which when I was reading this, I was thinking, yeah, okay, they've got 2 dwellings there, we're replacing with 2 other dwellings, that seems absolutely fine. And I hear it's about to expire, but it's there at the moment. The one that worried me was we're saying that we accept it under D9. And according to our D9 said it should be outside but well related to the settlement boundary. And we're told by the parish council we're 480 metres away from the settlement boundary. I would be a little worried if we're saying 400 metres plus is well related, because that would open up a whole can of worms elsewhere. So it's like, I see no problem with granting this, but I'm just worried that are we setting ourselves up for a potential interesting discussion in the future on other sites about is 480 metres well related to the settlement boundary? And the other final question was, and you might have covered it by mentioning the unilateral undertaking. But in the past, when we've had we've often in the conditions conditioned the name of the people who are going to have to be in there as part of the self-build. That's not in the conditions here as far as I can see today. But is that covered under the unilateral undertaking, and therefore we know who is in there and definitely that it is the people involved?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Phil. Start with the unilateral agreement to start with, because we've not put that condition on this time because it doubles up with the unilateral agreement. So because we would be relying on that, that would control the funds. With regard to the meeting policy, it's slightly crosses over policy CO1 policy CO2 as well as D9. CO2 deals with infill self-build, or it deals with infill, where you are actually clearly in a countryside location, well away, you can be well away from settlement boundaries, but where there's a collection of a number of dwellings and you can genuinely infill within those dwellings without impacting or extending out into the open countryside, then that can be an acceptable infill, which is covered by CO2. D9 does relate to self-build where normally you're near a settlement boundary. So it's almost sort of in between them both, but it is covered by CO2 anyway, because there's a nucleus of the number of dwellings that it would meet that policy. But in my view, it's relatively well connected because you can easily walk to the village once you've crossed the road quite safely, because there are links to the village in behind Bath Road, so you don't have to walk along Bath Road.
Happy to then move the recommendation, but I would be personally, I think for the future of issues, it's like better as long as we're not, if we could avoid relating it to D9, whereas they, I think it potentially opens up a problem. But as I say, I'm happy with the recommendation. I think it's absolutely reasonable. But as I say, I do think we will have some interesting conversations in the future about 480 metres being well related, because we've had them in the past about areas less than that, and it will cause us some interesting discussion that way.
No. Yeah, so under policy G9, so the bit that you related to is app identified rural settlements, 100% small scale, self-build, custom build, that are outside but well related to the settlement boundary will be supported, full stop. The bit that this would actually fall under is in the countryside, because outside of the settlement boundary, 100% of self-build, custom build, infill development, 4 or fewer, which meets the requirements of CO2, which is what Shanta was saying earlier, will also be supported. But such proposals will only be supported where the following criteria are met. And then there's a list of bullet points, the first of which is the scale and nature of the development is appropriate to the size, accessibility, character and identity of the existing community. So for this one, because it's outside of the settlement boundary, technically it's classed as countryside. Under the countryside element of it, we're satisfied that 2 dwellings just set back of the main road complies with the first bullet point of D9 in terms of it would be appropriate to the scale and character. So we're not saying it's in the settlement boundary, adjacent to the settlement boundary, or necessarily well related given the separation distance, but it is accommodated for in D9 just a little bit further down from that sentence.
That really should have to go with recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Good question. Thank you. So we've got a proposal to move the recommendation to that. I've got Councillor Bradford, Councillor Hendry.
And how important the pre-app is. It makes so much difference when you come to these planning applications. They have a look at it. People talk to them beforehand. It's so much easier, I think, when it comes to council.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Everything I was going to ask has actually been covered, so.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bolton, no. Okay, thank you. So we've got a proposer and a seconder to agree the officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous. Okay, thank you. Can I please now seek advice before we go into the next application? We have to finish this committee at 1 o'clock. We've got 30 minutes. I don't want to be seen to be rushing, but by the same token, we have a speaker on the next application who's probably been here all morning. If we get part way through the application and it's not complete, what happens at 1 o'clock?
Chair, I haven't seen your constitution, but I would imagine a meeting could be extended with the chair's discretion.
Yeah.
And in those circumstances, you may feel it's appropriate to extend, not going to be a brief period if any, but I say that with the caveat that I haven't seen the authority's constitution on this point. I've just seen other constitutions which make similar arrangements.
Yeah, thank you. So for confirmation, the constitution allows you to have a meeting up to 4 hours, after which you needed to have started the last item to be able to complete it beyond the 4-hour window. Because we started at 10, technically that takes us up to 2, so you can continue, but we do need lunch break. Yeah.
So in that case, without further ado, let's crack on. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm taking the next application at Hardbourne House. So it's Church Lane in Compton Bishop. It's an application for the change of use of an existing annex into a holiday let and annex. So basically it's allowing a dual use for the current single use. The reason for the recommendation is reason for bringing to committee is because it's my recommendation is contrary to the needs of the parish council. Just want to say further to the report the members have received, we have had written comments which have been received from the neighbours and the adjoining neighbour. I'll come on to the relationship there, but as I understand that person registered to speak, so rather than present their points, I'm going to allow them to present them in their own words, because they're speaking in due course. Location, we're up at Compton Bishop, and we're just in sort of just in the middle of it's a very small settlement, just in the middle of the built form of the village. And the application site this is Holborn House, where the proposal is. The existing annex is this one here. So this building, I'll show you a bit more detail with the plans. This is the street view, just to get a bit of context. So that's Holborn House there. You can see the annex building. You can just about see this sort of pitched roof here, and that's along the boundary. The neighbouring property is just sort of obscured by this vegetation. There's a further neighbouring property which is a bit further down, which really relationships between these two, which I'll sort of touch on. This shows the site plan. So that's that bit of the barn where the annex is currently, and its position relative to the house. So elevation drawings, there aren't changes proposed. I'm just showing these just for bring them to attention. So that's sort of side looking from the back, and then this is the rear looking from the applicant's sort of rear garden, and then this is front elevation. So that's the elevation, and we'll sort of talk about this because this sort of balcony section here where just in terms of relationship with the neighbour, I'll come on to in due course. There aren't any physical changes proposed to facilitate the use part of the application, but I will discuss the requirement for a privacy screen here in due course. Floor plans, again, these show that there's accommodation provided across 2 levels. We've got sort of open plan living area, kitchen, and then 2 and a bit bedrooms upstairs. So main considerations: principal development, residential community, highways, parking. So the site, so there's an existing permission which allows the building to be used as an annex. So that's from 2013. The annex is formed following an alteration and conversion of the existing building in that location. I understand that the annex until recently have been occupied by a member of the applicant's family. They're now seeking more flexible use, either allowing it to be as an annex or as a holiday let, something that we've granted in other locations. Though I mentioned the site is in the village of Compton Bishop, so that's not a designated settlement in our local plan. So the site is in the area identified as countryside. It's also in the Mentor Hills National Landscape. We do have tourism policy, so that's the main test against which we assess applications of this nature. That does say that schemes in the countryside should be within or close to settlements. So in that sense, it's within a settlement, it does comply. It does, however, say that such schemes should be supported by a business case. So some of the things we've had to consider as part of this application is that proposal does not, so we're not proposing a new built form in the countryside, and those applications can be more problematic. What we're talking about here is the reuse of an existing building already has a lawful use. There was a business case which came in as part of the application. It did identify the potential for holiday accommodation in the locality, including for family size provision. I mean, there's some limitations to the business case. It's fairly limited in detail, but ultimately the scale of the proposal is fairly modest in respect. And its impacts are constrained by the existing size and use of the building. The building's already there, it already has a use. There's limitations about what else it could be put to. In terms of the flexible use proposed, that would enable the use to fall back to an annex use if the holiday let use sort of falls away or isn't perhaps seen to be viable. Because that's certainly a concern in terms of when you're looking at countryside applications in countryside locations for holiday provision. Some of the tests in terms of business case are about if you grant it here and it doesn't really work, what happens to the building? Is there an application further down the line? So it hasn't really worked, can I have it as a dwelling? In this current scenario, what happens is use falls back to an annex. And as you see from the photos, the relationship between the two is they can't be subdivided. You can't subdivide the plot. So there isn't really scope for it to turn into a dwelling in its own right. It just falls back to annex use, which overcomes some of those concerns you might have about, the limited detail of the business case. But here we would consider that to be a reasonable level of information given the circumstances of the site. So overall, we would consider the principle therefore is acceptable. It is a acceptable form of small scale tourism in the countryside. And then I'll just come on to other matters. Amenity, I mentioned that sort of balcony that sort of sits up there, that first floor window. It's existing. It has a sort of Juliet balcony arrangement. And then the other photos, that's just from the rear. So this is the applicant's own garden. And then again, looking sort of stood within the applicant's garden, but looking towards the side. And then these two photos very more show the relationship between the two properties. So that's again that sort of balcony window. So it is existing, and the views it has towards neighbouring properties. You can kind of see on the site plan that building's there, the neighbouring properties here. An objection has been received from the neighbour regarding concern about amenity impacts, i.e. sort of overlooking that could arise from the window that's here. Now I'm mindful of the fallback position. This is the pre-existing window, which is approved under a previous application. But the previous permission did include a requirement for the installation of a partial privacy screen. So across effectively the lower half of the balcony, and that hasn't been implemented. So that is, that's an issue. Now, just in terms of looking at the relationship, I think since the previous application was granted, which was over sort of 10 plus years ago, there has been boundary vegetation which has grown up between the two properties, and that has reduced opportunities for overlooking between the two. And it will also reduce the perception of overlooking. But nonetheless, do consider that the privacy screen would perform a function and it would help reduce that perception of overlooking. It is disappointing that it hasn't been delivered. So we propose that if members are minded to grant this application, that there would still be the requirement for installation of an obscure privacy screen, so sort of a half-height screen, just to reduce some of that. There is condition wording within the report that required the metal balustrade to be removed and the obscure screen replaced. The applicant has since been in touch to say that they would like to install the privacy screen but retain the metal balustrade. And I think the metal balustrade is not the main point of contention really here. What we want to see is the installation of the screen. I don't really mind whether it is provided with or without the metal balustrade. And therefore, I'll be suggesting to members that they're minded to grant that the wording be amended to allow, not necessarily, doesn't even need to refer to the metal balustrade. It needs to refer to the installation of the screen. But I don't think we need to make specific reference to the metal balustrade. I'll probably mind to take that wording out and then, so that's in terms of the relationship. I understand that there's concern from the neighbour there, but we're partly dealing with the pre-existing situation, and the nature of the use, which is effectively lawful. It can lawfully be used for a form of residential occupation, and the holiday use is a form of residential occupation. So there are the impacts are going to be similar in order. There's some other sort of amenity bits I just want to touch on that's come up through the application process. So, and this is something that the Parish Council have raised in terms of concern about alleged leaks from a septic tank which is located at the property. So you can see the property is a period property. As I understand it, it has a large Victorian era septic tank, and that drains, so it collects the waste, and then it drains under the road and discharges to a ditch. Now, the council's no, that is not functioning as it should, and there is an issue there to which the Council's Environmental Health team are aware and are monitoring at the moment. The applicant is in the process of replacing the tank, which requires building regulation approval. So in planning terms, we don't consider that the proposed change of use would result in a material increase in occupancy that would justify imposing a planning condition to require them to upgrade it. We're talking about two very similar residential uses in terms of there's not going to be an intensification of use. Nonetheless, the council has statutory powers to secure the remedial action outside planning if the upgrade isn't forthcoming. And that's something I did discuss with environmental health whether there was there was enough intensification associated with this application to kind of capture the upgrade. They said they didn't feel that was the case, but they have the powers to enforce against it. As I understand it, the applicant has done trial pits because they have to do the percolation test to inform the solution, and a building control application is imminent. But in terms of those amenity aspects, I don't think we could tie it necessarily to this scheme, so I'm not recommending any conditions regarding to that issue, but I'm acknowledging that it sits there. And then highways and parking, there's an existing access onto Church Lane. It's very lightly traffic rural road. Any increased vehicle movement associated with change is going to be minimal. Not something that's going to have a significant impact on the operation of the road network, and there's sufficient parking on site to accommodate the needs of the development. So overall, we say the scheme would enable use as either annex or holiday let. We would consider the impacts arising are similar in nature to the lawful use, and subject to the amended geograde panel. I'm recommending the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. We have two speakers on this application, and I'd like to invite Heather Dean to come forward, please. You have 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. This case is not simply a change of use. It represents a severe active breach of planning control and a permanent threat to the environment of the Mendip Hills national landscape. I bring 3 critical planning facts to the Committee's attention. First, the applicant is operating in an active defiance of a statutory consultee. The Environment Agency issued a clear directive recommending that no occupancy should be permitted at this site until the severe unresolved sewage infrastructure issues are fully rectified. The applicant has disregarded this safety mandate. The annex was advertised for rental in 2026 January and has already been occupied continuously since for the last 6 months, not by the family. Second, this application is a textbook case of overdevelopment. Condition 3 Harborne House, granted in July 2013, states the annex accommodation hereby permitted shall be used solely in connection with the use of Harborne House as a single family dwelling and not as a separate unit of accommodation for permanent or holiday use. This site is not appropriate for further dwelling. The applicant states the annex is too small for a family of 2 adults and 2 small children, yet the proposed change of use states the annex is able to accommodate up to 6 people. Cramming 6 holidaymakers into a space deemed too small for a young family is unacceptable. 6 people generate significantly more waste, more noise, more destruction. To suggest there is no difference between family members and holiday occupants staying in the annex is naive and not credible. Research by Chartered Institute of Housing highlights that short-term lets can significantly disrupt community cohesion, with neighbours' complaints about noise and antisocial behaviour increasing. Thirdly, the location is fundamentally unsuitable for a holiday business. Even with off-road parking, people holidaying in this quiet village with 0 amenities, no shop, no pub, and no public transport links will be entirely car dependent. This contradicts the Council's own sustainable climate policy. Conclusion. Deemed too small for a family of 4 but suitable for a family of 6 is both illogical and unconvincing. It contradicts the original assessment of the property's capacity and raises serious questions about the credibility of the applicant's arguments to justify a change of use. It would appear less about genuine practicality and more about bending the facts to fit the desired outcome. There are no justifiable reasons to remove the 2013 condition because nothing has changed. It is clear that due process has been ignored, and so as contravening a direct from the EA that was first raised 11 months ago. To date, only a percolation test has been done, with the septic tank being emptied twice in 7 weeks since May. The sewage problem continues, and yet the planning department are about to grant the change of use despite the directive given by the EA not to consider this application until the sewage problem is fully resolved. The planning enforcement department allows repeated changes and blatant breaches of conditions to go unchecked. This action erodes public trust and endorses non-compliance as an acceptable means to force outcomes. I urge the committee to refuse this application outright and recommend enforcement action as per the Council's EA policy. Thank you.
Thank you. You've raised some issues there. We have another speaker.
Yes.
Our planning officer will respond when the others, after the other speaker. Thank you. Can I invite Charles Balling to come forward, please? Good afternoon. You have 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start and we'll set the clock.
First issue
could you
raised is,
the microphone?
do I press the?
Yes, it's the grey button.
Oh, thank you.
There we are. Thank you.
Right, the main reason this was brought before you is because the parish council objected, that they did not object on any planning grounds, that what they sought to raise was the ongoing problem we've had with the septic tank. I want to make it clear that I've been proactive and engaged with the parish council and the council's environmental health officer and building control since this matter was first raised with me last October. Since then, as has been mentioned, we've made a lot of progress. I'm a retired chartered surveyor, so it's the sort of thing I don't mind getting stuck into. I don't want this matter to persist any longer than necessary. Trial pits we've had our front garden dug up now for these trial pits, and we are, with that information, we have submitted an application for building control permit, and they have promised to respond within 3 to 5 working days to enable us to get cracking on a new system. The second point I'd like to talk about is that raised by my neighbour. I think one of the issues here is that they are architects of their own misfortune. A few years ago, they built a very big extension on the back of their property, 2 stories, pushing their property over 4 metres closer to ours. And in so doing, they breached a covenant not to overlook our property. That is still live. We are reacting to that. I would say that in Compton Bishop, the demographic we have for holiday lettings is of respectful people who come to enjoy the countryside and the walks and the wildlife. We're very lucky, my wife and I, to be custodians of a house you've seen the pictures of, where we take great pride of ownership, and we have the greatest vested interest to make sure that we do not create a nuisance. And we will not tolerate any nuisance. So I think that can't be trumped, really. So the other thing I would like to say is that in the 12 or 13 years since we've been living in Compton Bishop, we've never heard of any adverse problems from the small holiday lets. I think this is the sort of thing that might be expected on a big property somewhere where multiple groups of people come together, but certainly it's not something that will be tolerated where we live. So I hope you understand that we have got plans imminent now for addressing the problem with the environmental concerns, and that we are not going to allow anything to happen in this property which will be detrimental. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you wish to respond at all to?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to pick up some of the points there raised by Mrs. Dean. I mean, she made reference to the property being occupied continuously and potentially breaching conditions. So obviously, we have to consider the application on its own merits, and I don't have any information as to whether that is the case. And I think that would be an ultimate matter for council enforcement team if that has been. I can't really comment much more on that specifically. The question about overdevelopment, the proposal doesn't increase the level of accommodation proposed at the property. It's exactly the same number of bedroom sizes. So in terms of the potential for occupation previously and in future, there isn't additional accommodation provision. So I get you'll get some mismatch between different size holiday occupancy groups available. But the proposal is to make it so much bigger that you can necessarily get larger groups. So I wouldn't say there aren't any physical changes. So I'm not sure about the point about overdevelopment. I understand they said there's some differences in the character of how holiday lets and residential use and there are some similarities, and there will be circumstances where there may well be some differences. I think in this case, one of the things that have to assist the applicant is that it's where the holiday let is in such close proximity to their own dwelling that they will have an interest in managing it appropriately in their own amenity. It's not in their interest to have it run in such a way that it's going to cause because it's as close to the applicant's own property as it's close to the neighbour. And I think that will have a degree of self-regulation about it. I know that it said the location isn't acceptable for holiday use, but I think we are talking about Mendip Hills National Landscape. I know that there's other holiday occupation provision in the village, in the vicinity, and it's an attractive place for people who want to go on holiday. And I think that is a reasonable case to make, say that other people will want to go and stay there. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it's unacceptable. And there's a certain amount of car use that's going to be inevitable with people holidaying in countryside locations. I think that's the main point, but if I've missed anything, feel free to come back.
Councillor Filmer.
I'll make a start anyway. It was just a couple of queries, but we obviously there was mention made about the EA saying that this shouldn't be granted until it had been sorted. But it should be clarified in terms of what we've had on the file. The other thing I wanted to just check in terms of I read the report, and I can understand the objective comment in terms of intensification of use, because when I was reading it, it feels to me like there could be, but if that's not what we're able to work on, I think the one thing I would just want clarification on is terms of trigger points for these conditions, because the first one says development should be begun before the expiration of 3 years. And I'm not sure if we're being told that potentially it's already in operation, whether that trigger point needs clarification. And in equally a similar vein, condition 4 talks about prior to the first use of the development hereby approved the balustrade being sorted out. I wonder whether that should be something that's maybe dated rather than a condition of that nature, because otherwise, again, who's saying when that trigger actually happens? And the final one on the conditions was the previous condition said this was not suited. I think the phrase was the site was not appropriate for a further dwelling. We haven't repeated that in our conditions this time. And it would be unfortunate if that was interpreted as a downgrading of the concern over the use. I just wonder whether that could be reflected in condition 3, just to make it clear that this is not appropriate as a site for development should the business case not prove to be as rosy as it seems.
So just in terms of, we haven't had comments from Environment Agency on this application. We've had discussions with environmental health, and those discussions had happened in relation to the septic tank, because seeing the Parish Council's comments, I wanted to understand what the situation was. And environmental health were aware of it. They didn't feel they needed to make specific comments on this application because there aren't any in the reports. That's based on my discussions with them. But there wasn't any mandate not to approve the application from any statutory consultancy. In terms of further dwelling, in terms of wording the condition, yes, we can put that in there for consistency's sake. In terms of the timing and the triggers, and we've had a discussion with Dawn about what's the right way to do it. My view was that, and from the side, I don't believe the development has commenced. I think if it's tricky in terms of putting the timing condition on, because if the development's commenced, you can put a condition on that says something like within so many weeks of the date of the decision, you should go and do X. But if you haven't commenced, that's not really appropriate. My view in terms of the balustrade timing is that we should still use it as a prior to first use, because that use triggers when they first use it for holiday use. And I'm not under the understanding that any holiday use has happened at that site, and that's not what it's not submitted as a retrospective application. If it turned out that they would immediately be in breach of that condition. We have the power, technically, if they never implement it, to enforce against the existing condition on the existing permission. So I think we're kind of covered in eyes and scenario as I've drafted it, subject to the changes about the metal balustrade, about the trigger points. I think to put we should do it within so many weeks will be difficult, because I think it might be difficult to enforce against that if they technically never implement the permission. So that's why I've come up with it in the form I have, and I think it's probably the most workable way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Not got too much to say here. Read the report. Something I even read twice, very thorough, very detailed. Seen what the case officer was put on the screen, and again, that goes hand in hand. Obviously, listen to the public speakers telling me what to say, the responses from the case officer to the council, and listen to the councillor. So I can't do much better than that. All in, wrap it all up, and no problem at all with this. So, and I want to go to the case officer and to recommend grant permission.
Thank you. Would that be, Dean, you mentioned when you were talking about amending a condition about the installation of a screen.
So I think the recommendation would be to agree to specific wording for that with chair and vice chair, but ultimately that's seeking to basically, I'm going to remove the word about metal balustrade and provide a form of words that basically the obscure screen, and leaving it flexibly enough that it doesn't necessarily rely on the metal balustrade coming or going effectively.
And also councillor Filmer raised about adding the
into the reason.
Yeah, okay. So we have a proposer to accept the officer's recommendation with those amendments. And do we have a second? Councillor Ham seconds. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you, members. So we do have one outstanding application, but there are no speakers and there doesn't seem to be anybody here, and we've run out of time. So we cannot add it to this afternoon's agenda, but it will go on August's agenda, and that's the Enmore. So I'm sorry that we ran out of time for that one, but thank you everyone, and I'll see you back at 2 o'clock for this afternoon.